Chapter 479. In the Caesar Hotel. Chen Qinghuan, who could almost be said to have spent every second as long as a year, finally saw Wang Tianzong. Tyrant had left. He was seriously injured. As an invincible realm expert on the divine list, he was like a tramp. It could be imagined how weak his combat capability was. Tyrant did not believe in the Shadow Throne, so Wang Tianzong gave him the address of a small secret base established by the Wang family of Beihai in Eastern Europe. With that balance, Tyrant's injury could be completely stabilized in just a few days. At that time, Tyrant with indefinite grace would be even more terrifying than when he was in the Polar Ground Alliance. He already had a chess piece to break the game. And it was a chess piece that could be controlled. Wang Tianzong could use Tyrant to create all the situations he needed. He was completely relieved and in a good mood. When he saw Chen Qinghuan, he even got up and shook hands with Chen Qinghuan. Even though Chen Qinghuan was a general of Zhongzhou state, he was flattered by such treatment, so he behaved more respectfully and cautiously. Naturally, he did not know what Wang Tianzong was thinking. But if he wanted to control the Snowdance Corps, it would not do any harm to the Wang family of Beihai at present. The identity of Wang Qinglei's confidant might make Wang Tianzong hesitate, but when Wang Tianzong sent him to the Snowdance Corps, he must have made such a plan. All the reasons were there, but Chen Qinghuan was still a little worried about gains and losses. He had made up his mind. If this trip was successful, he would make Li Tianlan a mere figurehead. He did not mind giving up some control of the Snowdance Corps at all. At that time, he would let Wang Tianzong's confidant come over to take over several important positions. Now seeing the smile on Wang Tianzong's face, Chen Qinghuan felt relieved, but he had no time to say anything else. After all, the situation in Reki City was extremely tense, and time was more important than anything else. Li Tianlan's injury might not be cured in a short time, but the mobilization of the Snowdance Corps needed to race against time. Although Chen Qinghuan was an IM and could not see the situation in Reki City clearly, at least he knew that as the strongest party, the Wang family of Beihai needed to break the current situation as soon as possible. So the sooner he took down the Snowdance Corps, the more he could cooperate with Wang Tianzong. Your Majesty! Chen Qinghuan didn't even have time to sit down completely before he said directly, to be honest, I hesitated for a long time when I came to Reki City today. 10 days ago, I spoke to Marshal Li on the phone. Marshal Li ordered me to stabilize the rear and defend IM. It was a strict order. But the situation has been getting worse recently. I heard that other dark forces have even begun to harass the Snowdance Corps and Marshal Li has been unconscious. Finally, I decided to come here. After all, Marshal Li is unconscious, and I should shoulder the Li's vice-marshal. Responsible. Qinggu. Wang Tianzong nodded with a smile, threw a cigarette to Chen Qinghuan, and suddenly said, Do you know that you came 2 days later than I expected? Chen was shocked if Li as Qinglun, said, Tiana's, Chen, Qinglian as if. The corner of his mouth twitched, and he said with a wry smile, I hesitated. After all, Marshal Li's order was on my head, so I had to consider it carefully. Wang Yu Cheng. Qinghuan to say, Li Chen Li, Qinghuan Ling said he. Done. Chen Qinghuan was silent for a while. He suddenly stood up as if he had made up his mind, and bowed deeply to Wang Tianzong. Wang Tianzong looked at Chen Qinghuan calmly. Your Majesty, I'm incompetent. I'm ashamed of Zhongzhou State and Beihai. Now Marshal Li is in a coma, and I'm ambitious but not talented. In the face of the chaos in Reki City, even if I'm willing to do my best, I'm afraid I can't support the overall situation. I know that Your Majesty has a lot of things to do, but the situation is critical. Qinghuan still has a presumptuous request. If possible, I hope that Your Majesty can temporarily go to the office of the President to preside over the overall situation for the sake of Zhongzhou State and the Snowdance Corps. I'm the Vice-Marshal of the Snowdance Corps. Today, I'm standing here to invite Your Majesty to the office of the President. Wang Tianzong quietly looked at Chen Qinghuan, who was sincere. After a while, he asked, Are you inviting me? On behalf of every warrior of the Snowdance Corps, I invite Your Majesty. On behalf of everyone in the Snowdance Corps. In other words, Li Tianlan was also represented by Qin Qinghuan at this time. Only when Your Majesty is in charge of the Snowdance Corps can we really deter the Dark World. Later, I will report to Zhongzhou State and elaborate on the problems we encounter today. Please don't have any concerns, Your Majesty. For the sake of Zhongzhou State, please go to the office of the President to preside over the overall situation. Qin Qinghuan's voice became more and more excited. This time, he did not bend down. Instead, he gave an extremely standard military salute. Qin Qinghuan took a deep breath and looked at Qin Qinghuan's face. After a long time, he said slowly, "Does the Snowdance Corps know that you're coming?" "Yes, I've informed Deputy Marshal Drifting Cloud before. They may have some misunderstanding about me coming here, but everyone is doing everything for Zhongzhou State. Although I'm not talented enough, I can handle the daily affairs of the Snowdance Corps. At that time, please deter the invincible realm experts of other dark forces, Your Majesty." Wang Tianzong laughed. If he went to the office of the President, it would definitely be easy to invite him in but difficult to send him away. This was exactly the effect that Qin Qinghuan wanted. Once he took control of the Snowdance Corps and was by Wang Tianzong's side, it would be more than just the invincible realm experts of other dark forces who would be deterred. At that time, even if Li Tianlan woke up, not to mention that he was still seriously injured, even if he fully recovered, he would not be able to do anything. Wang Tianzong stood up and said calmly, "Lead the way. I'll go with you." This was definitely not a polite remark on the scene. This was Wang Tianzong's attitude. It represented Wang Tianzong's recognition of Qin Qinghuan's control of the Snowdance Corps. Qin Qinghuan was ecstatic. He turned around and said respectfully, "Your Majesty, please." He knew that after tonight, barring any mishaps, he would truly reach the pinnacle of his life. Not only would he attain a lofty status, he would also command his own legion. This was a completely different world from when he was still a high-ranking member of the North Sea Legion who was constantly being ostracized. The wind and rain outside were messy and cold. When Qin Qinghuan's military off-road vehicle stopped in the square in front of the office of the President, the elites of the Snowdance Corps, who were temporarily stationed here, stopped the car without hesitation. "I'm Qin Qinghuan." Qin Qinghuan rolled down the window and said, "Your Vice Marshal." There was no anger in his tone. He just looked at the equally serious soldier with a serious face, nodded, and said, "Strong wind and heavy rain, but you are loyal to your duty. Not bad. Although I was in IM before, I have heard of your deeds. You have fought for the prestige of the Snowdance Corps and won glory for the country. Good, very good." The soldier was completely unmoved. He said softly with a poker face, "Please show me your ID." Qin Qinghuan took out the ID and handed it to the soldier. Looking at the wind and rain outside the window, there was a flash of fire in his eyes. The ID of the Snowdance Corps was very special. It belonged to the standard style of the Special Warfare Army. There was no troop number, national emblem of Zhongzhou State, or anything that could represent the belonging and position of a soldier. There was only an extremely complicated steel seal with a code and the sword-edge logo of the Snowdance Corps. It could not be imitated, and it was easy to identify. The soldier of the Snowdance Corps looked at the national emblem seriously and frowned slightly. He might not understand the game and calculation of the upper level of the Snowdance Corps, but he was born in the Border Control Corps. As for the Vice Marshal of the Beihai Corps, he knew that the other party's position was not very consistent with his. But now that the ID was there, he had no reason not to let him go. After hesitating for a moment, he handed the ID to Qin Qinghuan and saluted. "Vice Marshal, please." Qin Qinghuan nodded with satisfaction. Suddenly, he said casually, "How is Marshal Li?" "His Highness is fine." The soldier said expressionlessly. Qin Qinghuan drove with a smile, but a trace of gloom flashed in his eyes. The commander of the Snowdance Corps was the Marshal. The most proper form of address for Li Tianlan should be Marshal Li. But until now, Qin Qinghuan had never heard of the name Marshal Li in the Snowdance Corps. When everyone mentioned Li Tianlan, there was only one name. "Your Highness." What did this mean? The wind and rain are swift and violent. Cold. The green off-road vehicle drove into the square. After passing through several checkpoints along the way, it finally approached the gate of the presidential palace. Wang Tianzong, who had been silently observing all this along the way, suddenly said, "The Snowdance Corps is indeed a strong army." His tone was a little indifferent, but also a little regretful. 3 years ago, the decisive battle of Tiandu and the border battle broke out one after another. Wang Tianzong went to the border in person. The first murderous weapon, human emperor, opened fire. The clear light illuminated the entire dark world. That battle was a deal between Wang Tianzong and the Dongqing clan. The attack of the human emperor was supposed to send the entire Thunderbolt battalion to Tiannan and hand it over to Dijiang. But in the end he only got half of it. But now, half of it was given to Li Tianlan. This was a truly powerful army. Even the North Sea Legion, which was known as the most powerful legion in the world, didn't have many elite soldiers. Every time he thought of the tens of thousands of troops, Wang Tianzong felt that he had been schemed against. He even suspected that the Dongqing clan had calculated all this 3 years ago, so they used the Thunderbolt battalion to exchange the human emperor's fire. Otherwise, today, with Wang Tianzong and the human emperor in hand, even if they were not the chosen one, what was there to be afraid of in the face of the so-called chaos? The off-road vehicle stopped at the gate of the presidential palace. Chen Qingwan personally held an umbrella for Wang Tianzong. When they were about to enter the door, a person came out in a hurry. He saw Wang Tianzong, and Wang Tianzong also saw him. Both of them were slightly stunned. "Going out?" Wang Tianzong laughed and said in a gentle voice. Qin Shilai nodded, and he became calmer. He had challenged Wang Tianzong 3 times and retreated unscathed 3 times. It seemed that he owed the Wang family of Beihai a great favor, but in fact, the 2 sides had cooperated, and no one had treated the other badly. Now that the Qin clan was on Li Tianlan's side, the old affection had finally disappeared with the storm in Eastern Europe. Wang Tianzong nodded and didn't say much. The moment the 2 sides passed by, he frowned and suddenly felt that something was wrong. Qin Shilai seemed to be too calm when he saw him. At the same time, in the floating restaurant of the presidential palace, Li Tianlan and Holy Virgin Angel's dinner was coming to an end. Drifting Cloud hurried over and said with a solemn and excited look, "Your Highness, His Majesty Sword Emperor and Vice Marshal Chen are here." Li Tianlan nodded, picked up a snow-white square towel, wiped his mouth, and suddenly laughed. Then closed the door. Chapter 480. The wind and rain fell. The thick and cold night enveloped the entire Reki city. The noise of the city gradually quieted down, and the roaring wind and rain seemed to be the only sound in the whole world. The rain fell in a hurry, wild and cold. In a medium-sized church in the west of Reki city, Arsis, the commander of the Holy Disarmament Corps of the Vatican, had just finished praying. He knelt on the ground and looked up at the cross above. His eyes flickered, and no one knew what he was thinking. Behind Arsis was a mass of dark figures. The light in the church was extremely faint. The crowd in black almost merged with the darkness, which looked extremely strange. But everyone was kneeling and praying. In the silent atmosphere, the whole church was devout. Arsis stood up silently, walked to the door of the church, and looked at the rain under the night sky in silence. He suddenly felt that the night was incomparably oppressive, with a suffocating feeling that made it hard for him to breathe. Arsis frowned slightly and whispered, "I don't feel good." "You don't have to think too much." A voice sounded behind Arsis. Mellad, the second commander of the Holy Disarmament Corps, walked over slowly and said respectfully, "I will take care of all this." Arsis narrowed his eyes and seemed to hesitate. "No matter what, it's much better than you doing it yourself." Mellad said calmly. Arsis had a secret that was not a secret. He was the 3rd on the divine list in the Dark World today, and he used to be the 2nd. But whether he was the 3rd or the 2nd, his position didn't seem to be very stable. His innate talent was undoubtedly astonishing. However, no matter how amazing one's aptitude was, there would always be a limit. Trying his best to enter the peak of the invincible realm was Arisis's limit. He had a firm foothold in this realm, but he was no longer able to pursue the peak of the invincible realm. In the past few decades, the reason why he had been able to stay in the top 3 of the divine list was that, in addition to his own terrifying strength, the most important thing was the Pope's coronation. The coronation was similar to mental control or mental hypnosis. In the state of absolute concentration, the Pope's coronation could stimulate a person's will to the greatest extent, so that the person's will, reaction speed, and other comprehensive qualities could be improved a little. This improvement was almost meaningless to experts in the ice-condensing realm and the fire-flaming realm. But for experts at the half-step invincible realm and the peak of the invincible realm, the improvement was great. This small increment often meant a whole new world. After the coronation, Arcis had the strength of the top 3 or even the top 2 on the divine list. However, the coronation was not permanent. Such an upgrade would also consume energy. The coronation of the Pope could probably support Arcis for 3 all-out battles. After 3 times, he would fall into a period of weakness due to excessive mental exhaustion. In other words, Arcis, who was in Eastern Europe but had never made a move, was his true peak state. Li Tianlan asked Arcis to take action tonight. In addition to taking care of Arcis' dignity, the main reason why Saintus Angel was in a dilemma was because of this. If Arcis didn't make a move, Mellad and the 100 Saint Warriors would. But as the time approached, the uneasiness in Arcis's heart grew stronger. His character was originally extremely decisive, but at this time, he hesitated. The Holy Disarmament Corps brought by Arcis was not small. But what Li Tianlan wanted were elites. This kind of deal had never been faked. The other party wanted elites. If ordinary warriors were sent out, even a thunder-shocking realm expert could see that something was wrong, not to mention deceiving Li Tianlan. Therefore, those who were about to set off with Mellad were the real elites of the Holy Disarmament Corps. If things didn't go well tonight, once these people were killed, it would definitely be a loss that could not be ignored for the Vatican. Arcis would also lose a considerable part of the super combat force that could be used in Eastern Europe. Is Li Tianlan trustworthy? Arcis suddenly asked. He has no reason not to cooperate with us. Mellad said softly, the Vatican is not hostile to Zhongzhou state. What we want is theocracy, and what he wants is military power. In a short time, he needs us to help him consolidate his position in Wulan state in terms of faith. And we also need to use his power to spread faith. From this point of view, he is trustworthy. What about from other aspects? Arcis said quietly. From other aspects, it was naturally whether Li Tianlan could defend Wulan state. Wulan state now belonged to the Snowdance Corps. No one denied this. And what the Dark Forces wanted to do now was to overthrow this fact. If Li Tianlan got Wulan state and could defend it, then Wulan state would truly belong to him. Mellad thought for a moment. He said calmly, let's see tonight. Arcis was silent for a long time. After a long time, he whispered, it's too sudden. Mellad smiled and didn't say anything. Li Tianlan had just woken up today. As soon as he figured out the situation, he took advantage of the situation to make this move. There was an element of coincidence in it. But he also appreciated the decisiveness of the young highness very much. Be careful on the way. Arcis ordered. Mellad bowed and responded. When he straightened up, Arcis's figure had disappeared from his sight. Mellad turned around slowly. The 100 Saint Warriors in the church had finished praying. This might be the last time many people prayed in this life. Magical faith. Mellad sighed with emotion in his heart, but his expression was still solemn. He waved his hand and said calmly, let's go. Our destination is the Caesar Hotel. The darkness was as dark as ink. In the magnificent suite of the Caesar Hotel, King Tong stood in front of the huge floor-to-ceiling window and looked out of the window at the never-ending wind and rain in the night. She felt a little uneasy for no reason. Poppy, who was reporting the recent situation of the Shadow Throne, saw her unconsciously. So when she finished her report, he finally couldn't help asking, Your Highness, is there something on your mind? King Tong raised her eyebrows, and a trace of confusion flashed in her eyes. Poppy looked at King Tong with concern. He looked a little nervous. It's okay. King Tong took a deep breath and said quietly, Is everything arranged? Everything is ready. Poppy smiled. King Tong nodded. Wang Tianzong said that he had waited for Qin Qinghuan for 2 days. In fact, this sentence was equivalent to saying that the Shadow Throne and the Wang family of Beihai had waited for Qin Qinghuan for 2 days. The 5 Eastern European countries centered on Wulan State were a large area of interest that was enough to make everyone go crazy. The Wang family of Beihai would not give up, nor would the Shadow Throne. But Li Tianlan took the lead. From Wang Tianzong's standpoint, Zhongzhou State was watching him, so he wanted to get the 5 Eastern European countries. He had to take down the Snowdance Corps first. The arrival of Qin Qinghuan was the key for the Wang family of Beihai to take down the Snowdance Corps. Wang Tianzong and Qin Qinghuan had left. Tyrant had been found. The indefinite grace was on the way. The Shadow Throne was preparing. Li Tianlan was in a coma. Everything was ready. Was there anything more perfect than this? Wang Tianzong started to work tonight. The Shadow Throne also had to start to work. When everything broke out, the Wang family of Beihai and the Shadow Throne had to create a favorable situation for themselves as soon as possible. Wait for the accurate news from His Majesty the Sword Emperor. King Tong's tone was calm, but she clenched her fists subconsciously. Calmness often represented confidence. And confidence represented fearlessness at any time. Qin Shilai was fearless. Wang Tianzong could clearly see the indifference and calmness in Qin Shilai's eyes. He suddenly felt a little weird. The office of the president was solemn and quiet. Wang Tianzong narrowed his eyes and looked around. The rain made the lights of the office of the president dim. The patrol team of the Snowdance Corps was quietly patrolling in the office of the president. Everything was normal. Wang Tianzong's footsteps paused subconsciously. Your Majesty? Qin Qinghuan looked back at Wang Tianzong. Wang Tianzong looked at his expression carefully, nodded and said calmly, "Let's go." The two of them went straight to the conference room. Qin Qinghuan believed that the news that he had entered the office of the president had spread. It was the best choice to go to the conference room now. The door of the conference room was right in front of him. Qin Qinghuan took a deep breath. His eyes were red, and his whole body was full of undisguised excitement. Pushing open the door, what greeted him was the real peak of his life. Qin Qinghuan's palm trembled, and he forced himself to calm down and push the door open. The spacious conference room was full of people. It seemed to be a respect for him, the vice-marshal. Qin Qinghuan nodded with satisfaction and instinctively looked at the position where he should sit. The main seat. There was a young man on the main seat, who was also looking at him with a smile. Qin Qinghuan suddenly blinked his eyes and shook his head. His face turned pale in an instant, and his eyes turned to drifting cloud with some resentment. Li Tianlan. How could it be Li Tianlan? From the spirit that Li Tianlan showed, Qin Qinghuan could be sure that Li Tianlan's combat capability had been restored perfectly. But how could all this be possible? Marshal Li. Qin Qinghuan lost his composure and exclaimed under the agitation. A strange light suddenly flashed in Wang Tianzong's eyes, and his brows furrowed more and more silently. Who asked you to come? Li Tianlan looked at Qin Qinghuan and asked with a smile, holding his cheeks. I. Qin Qinghuan opened his mouth. Sword Emperor was behind him. But in a short time, Qin Qinghuan broke out in a cold sweat. Your Highness has been unconscious. Qin Qinghuan also called Li Tianlan, Your Highness, in nervousness. I'm sitting here, and you say that I'm unconscious. Are you blind? Li Tianlan's voice grew softer. Qin Qinghuan's face turned livid for a moment. He lowered his head and remained silent. He really didn't know that Li Tianlan had woken up. In fact, from the second he saw Li Tianlan sitting here, his whole mind had been completely blank. I remember I said that if I let you stay in you either carry out the order or I will carry out the military law, right? Li Tianlan looked at Qin Qinghuan for a while and suddenly said. A great sense of crisis suddenly enveloped them. Qin Qinghuan trembled all over. He turned around instinctively and shouted, Your Majesty, save! Tianlan suddenly clenched his fists. In an instant, countless sword intents surged from all directions in the conference room, all rushing to Qin Qinghuan. Wang Tianzong put his palm on Qin Qinghuan's shoulder. Silently, All the sword intents in the conference room had completely disappeared. Li Tunlan narrowed his eyes and looked at Wang Tianzong coldly. Marshal Li has just woken up. Why are you so angry? Wang Tianzong said calmly. I'm not angry. Li Tunlan said blandly. His voice was getting louder and louder. You call me Marshal Li, so you should know my identity. I'm the commander of the Snow Dance Corps. My words are the military order in the Snow Dance Corps. His loud voice came out of the conference room and echoed between heaven and earth. It was extremely loud and dignified. Now Vice Marshal Chen Qingwan has disobeyed my military order. What should I do? There was a moment of silence. In the next second, a majestic and sonorous voice suddenly rang out. Loud noises converged from all directions, forming a torrent of sound. The voice spread throughout the office of the president. The wind and rain were turbulent, and the world was shaking, with an invincible power. Li Tianlan's voice spread outside the office of the president. In response to him was the roar of tens of thousands of elite soldiers of the Snow Dance Corps with all their might. What should he do if he disobeyed the order? Die. Chapter 481. Every force in the Dark World had a relatively mature base in Reki City. This kind of base was not to deal with Li Tianlan, but for Reki City and Wulan State. Wulan State was not the strongest in Europe, and it was not even a first-tier power. However, the geographical location of this country was definitely the most delicate. Occupying this place was tantamount to controlling the throat of Eastern Europe and Western Europe. The huge benefits represented behind it were enough to make any force and any country drool. There were many similar places all over the world. The Wang family of Beihai and Kunlun City had always been extremely sensitive to foreign forces, but there were also strongholds of various forces inside Zhongzhou State, but they were not large. Other than that, there were strongholds of major forces in every important place in the world, such as Federal City and Gotham in Star Nation, England's Fog City, and so on. Although the status of Reki City was not as important as that of the major international cities, from the perspective of interests, it was more important than any international city. The whole of Europe was at stake here. So it was no exaggeration to say that almost as long as the major forces existed, their bases in Reki City would last. The base of the Heroes Club in Reki City was very obvious. Towering in the center of the city, the Hero Building and the iconic forest emblem on the building were the most representative symbols they left here. The Hero Building could be said to be one of the tallest buildings in Reki City. As a super-large comprehensive office building, there were nearly 70 different companies operating at the same time. The Hero Group alone occupied the top 4 floors of the building, overlooking the entire Reki City day and night. The president of the Heroes Club had been living here since he arrived in Reki City. The top floor of the Hero Building had become his personal space. After arriving in Reki City, he rarely gave any clear orders. Most of the time, he stayed quietly on the top floor of the Hero Building, observing the situation in Eastern Europe or meditating. The people in the Hero Building almost never bothered their president. The most spacious and luxurious office on the top floor had become the forbidden area of the entire building. The forbidden area meant that almost no one could get close to it. Therefore, when the president of the Heroes Club saw the envelope that suddenly appeared on the table, he was extremely surprised. The content of the letter was very simple. There was only one time and one badge. A throne surrounded by light gray wings was imprinted on the paper, vivid and lifelike. Below the badge there was a time. August 27th. Today was August 27th. The president of the Heroes Club looked at the simple but complicated letter in his hand. He had been silent for nearly half an hour. The soft light shone on the paper, and the snow-white paper was dyed slightly yellow. The yellowish letter had an incomparably bright and brilliant color on it. It was a red line. It was as if someone had intentionally or unintentionally scratched a line on the paper. And this red line happened to fall on the badge of the Shadow Throne. This red line had a completely different feeling from the entire letter. It seemed to be written casually, but in the eyes of the president of the Heroes Club, he subconsciously narrowed his eyes. The red line was straight and swift. The president lowered his head and stared at the letter. Wherever the red lines passed, all he could see was dominance and sharpness. Vaguely, he seemed to understand the meaning of the letter, and his eyes flashed with a hint of excitement. "Your Highness Charlemagne," a voice with a strange rhythm suddenly rang out. The voice was soft and quiet without any impurities. It was extremely comfortable to listen to. The Hero Guild master raised his head, threw the letter away, and asked, "What do you think?" A slender and soft hand reached out and caught the letter. The soft light shone on the hand, emitting a delicate and charming halo. But the other party's whole body was blurred. The world was extremely real, but the other party seemed to be standing in the void. Even the light was swallowed up by the gloomy void. The blurry and flickering figure could not be identified as a man or a woman. He looked down at the letter in his hand and frowned faintly. "Who wants to eradicate the Shadow Throne? To be exact, I want to drive the Shadow Throne out of Eastern Europe." President Charlemagne's tone was full of depth. "But the Shadow Throne has invested a lot in Eastern Europe." He put the letter back on the table and said softly, "So?" Charlemagne laughed. His smile was cold, but his eyes were full of fire. "I'm a little tempted." The Shadow Throne had invested a lot in Eastern Europe this time. Queen Qingtong was at the Caesar Hotel. The entire Caesar Hotel was filled with people from the Shadow Throne. And this did not include the base they had established in Eastern Europe. If they could catch all these people tonight, especially Qingtong, if she also died here, the Shadow Throne, which had suffered a great loss of vitality, would probably become the next Polar Ground Alliance the next day. The relationship between the Heroes Club and the Wang family of Beihai was very bad. The death of the old patriarch of the Wang family of Beihai had a lot to do with the Heroes Club. Could be said to be a feud. The reason why the relationship between the Heroes Club and the Wang family of Beihai was so stiff was largely because of the Shadow Throne. This may be the best chance to defeat the Shadow Throne. Charlemagne said, "But I'm not sure if this is a trap or a cooperation. Mitchell, I need your advice." "Who wrote the letter?" Mitchell asked after a moment of silence. "There is Li Tianlan's sword intent in the letter. The channel should be from the Samsara Palace." Charlemagne said faintly. He suddenly laughed. "I've long heard that the intelligence system of the Samsara Palace is very terrifying, but I didn't expect it to be so terrifying. This letter can appear around me without anyone noticing, even you. I think we should check which people around us are pawns of the Samsara Palace." "Now is not the time." Mitchell thought for a moment and shook his head. "The other party is demonstrating. It's really not the time." Charlemagne patted the letter on the table. "The most important thing is tonight." "Are you sure it's Li Tianlan?" Mitchell seemed to be murmuring to himself. "This sword intent. It's very similar. But I haven't seen him fight in front of me, so I can't be absolutely sure." Charlemagne said slowly. Mitchell fell silent. After a long time, he slowly said, "We can be sure that there is a deep conflict between Li Tianlan and Wang Tianzong. Even from the news we received, Li Tianlan will face a great survival crisis in Eastern Europe, and most of the crisis comes from Wang Tianzong. So it's logical that he wants to borrow strength to destroy the Shadow Throne. As for us, we didn't have much resentment with Li Tianlan before. The Heroes Club should not be the first target that Li Tianlan wants to deal with. Tonight will be an opportunity to make the Shadow Throne suffer heavy losses. Li Tianlan needs to borrow strength. In other words, he needs our strength to have the confidence to hit the Shadow Throne hard. Maybe it's not just our strength. Since he wants to borrow strength, why not borrow all of it? I'm afraid that all the forces have received similar letters by now, right?" Charlemagne said lightly. "In that case, we have nothing to worry about," Mitchell said. Charlemagne raised his eyebrows. "Do you mean that we should get involved?" "You stay." Mitchell said, "I'll go." Charlemagne was silent for a moment. "Worried?" Mitchell laughed. "What are you talking about?" Charlemagne shook his head with a smile. "It's just your realm." Everyone knew that the president of the Heroes Club was very powerful. But it was also well known that the president of the Heroes Club was the only invincible realm expert. No one knew that Mitchell, who did not hold any position in the Heroes Club, had recently broken through to the Invincible Realm. He was a new Invincible Realm expert in the Dark World. Only Mitchell and Charlemagne knew about this. This was also the biggest trump card of the Heroes Club. Even if we don't expose our strength, it's not a problem to protect ourselves. Tonight's trip, the principle of the Heroes Club is to add icing on the cake, not to provide timely help. Charlemagne was silent for a moment and finally nodded. Mitchell turned around slowly. I don't like the name of the Heroes Group. Charlemagne suddenly said, if we can succeed in the trip to Eastern Europe, the Heroes Club will still be the Heroes Club. How about changing the name of the Heroes Group? Mitchell's body froze. Change what name? He asked. Habsburg Group. Charlemagne said blandly. Mitchell turned around slowly. The president of the Heroes Club had never had a surname. But as Charlemagne's confidant for many years, Mitchell naturally knew what Charlemagne's surname was. Habsburg. That was Charlemagne's surname. The most important thing was that it was not a South American surname. It was a surname of the Germanic Empire in Europe. In some ancient times, the surname Habsburg almost represented the history of the Germanic Empire to some extent. However, now this surname had become a surname that neither of the two major forces in Europe was willing to mention. The Vatican did not like to hear this surname. Rothschild did not like it either. Therefore, the Heroes Club did not like the Vatican or Rothschild. Tonight, you not only want to kill King Tong, but also want to inflict serious damage on the Vatican? Mitchell turned to look at Charlemagne and asked. Once Arcis is dead I can. Charlemagne said calmly. But Li Tianlan has cooperation with the Vatican. Tonight? Mitchell frowned. Arcis probably won't take action tonight, so we won't have too much conflict with the Vatican. As for the future, Charlemagne laughed. Li Tianlan can cooperate with the Vatican, but we can cooperate with Tribulation. Tribulation? Mitchell raised his eyebrows. In the past 3 years, there had only been 2 newly advanced Invincible Realm experts in the Dark World. One was him. The other was Tribulation, who had broken through in the final battle of Heaven Capital more than 3 years ago. Mitchell knew the name Tribulation, but at this time, he couldn't help but confirm it. Sai City? Charlemagne suddenly burst out laughing. He laughed for a long time before he stood up and walked to the window. Looking down at Reki City in the wind and rain, he whispered, I know a secret. This is the first half of the chapter. I feel uncomfortable all over and have a fever of more than 38 degrees. Every time the season changes, I must catch a cold. This has really become a routine. Chapter 482. Wang Tianzong heard the response of the Snowdance Corps. Reki City was not big. The roar of tens of thousands of people in unison was like thunder. With an overwhelming power, it swept through the whole city in an instant. Everyone in the city heard the response of the Snowdance Corps. In the room on the top floor of the Hero Building, President Charlemagne looked in the direction of the presidential palace. The wind and rain in the city were chaotic. However, the deafening roar continued to reverberate with a buzzing sound. A row of black motorcades slowly drove out of the Heroes Building. Charlemagne looked on quietly, and his expression grew calmer. West City Church. In the middle building, Arcis also heard the roar of the Snowdance Corps. He didn't understand Chinese. However, one could clearly sense the naked killing intent in this earth-shattering voice. Arcis thought of tonight's plan, and the corners of his mouth rose slightly. His smile was happy and satisfied. The plan had already begun. Moreover, Li Tianlan was credible. East of the city, Star State Embassy. Cass Rotter, the leader of the Men in Black, known as the top master in North America, had also received the same letter as President Charlemagne. He lowered his head and stared at the envelope. In the direction of the office of the president, a voice like a tsunami passed through the wind and rain. On the envelope, the red line streaked across the emblem of the Shadow Throne, and it seemed to become more and more fierce. Cass Rotter suddenly stood up. Your Highness. A burly man from Star State walked over and said respectfully, Contact Hong Kong. Castro said calmly, Fantasy World and Men in Black attacked together. Target, Caesar Hotel. Snow country. Mormons. In the basement, Qin Weibai slowly walked out with a pale and tired face. When she passed by the most flowering garden in the manor, she saw Tribulation standing in the flowers for the first time. Tribulation stood under a cherry tree and looked at Qin Weibai calmly. Martial uncle likes cherry blossoms? Qin Weibai asked knowingly with a smile. She kept calling him Uncle Master Jia. Of course, this was how Li Tianlan addressed him. Tribulation was silent for a while. No one knew what he was thinking of, but his eyes were in a trance. Then he remembered the business, shook his head, and said, "There's a change in Reki City." Qin Weibai's voice was clear and light. She never seemed to be flustered or anxious. No matter what the situation was, she was always as calm as still water. She was indifferent, calm, elegant, and perfect. Tribulation handed a fax in his hand to Qin Weibai. "This is the information from a man named Gandalf. He seems to be the person in charge of your intelligence in Reki City," Tribulation said. Qin Weibai took the fax and quickly looked down at it. Then he read it again carefully. The content of the fax was very short and concise. Qin Weibai read it twice to make sure that she did not miss anything. Then she chuckled. She was really beautiful. That kind of perfection that couldn't be described with any beautiful words had a kind of dreamy coldness and elegance. Along with her smile, the entire night sky seemed to become incomparably brilliant. Tribulation froze for a moment. She had never expected Qin Weibai to react like this. He was not from the Samsara Palace. But Qin Weibai was not on guard against him, so he could see the faxed information from Reki City. Strictly speaking, Li Tianlan's plan tonight actually conflicted with Qin Weibai's plan in many places. It would also mess up Qin Weibai's arrangement. Qin Weibai might not be angry and complain to Li Tianlan, but she should at least show some concern about her future plans. But now, Qin Weibai was really happy. "Are you happy?" Tribulation was a little confused. "Why wouldn't I be happy?" Qin Weibai chuckled and said softly, "My man is becoming more and more mature, strong, and independent. He has gradually integrated into the general trend of the dark world and began to take advantage of it. He has his own plan and is working hard for it. I'm his woman. Shouldn't I be happy?" "But he messed up your plan," Tribulation said. Qin Weibai nodded. "But those plans were originally for him. Now he has his own direction of action. As for my plan, I can modify it. I think many people are mistaken. Everything I do is for him, not what he has to do according to my plan. He is my man, not a vassal. On the contrary, the real situation is that I should take him as the master. His current plan is feasible. In that case, why should I be unhappy? But if he cooperates, your plan, I'm cooperating with him." Qin Weibai said, "All the time." "You're too sensitive." Tribulation was silent for a while and said, "Do you think, Martial Uncle, you think too much?" Qin Weibai looked at Tribulation with soft eyes. "I'm not so sensitive. I care about Tianlan's emotions, but I care more about his future. His plan is indeed feasible, so I'm willing to cooperate with him to modify my plan instead of letting him cooperate with me. Now Tianlan is becoming more and more mature. I just want to tell him in advance that maybe he is carrying a lot of things, such as the Samsara Palace, the Li family, Sai City, and the Dongcheng clan. But no matter how much he carries, he is still himself." Tribulation frowned. There were too many meanings in Qin Weibai's words, so he didn't understand what Qin Weibai meant. If he didn't understand, he wouldn't think about it for the time being. Tribulation asked directly, "How are you going to modify your plan?" Qin Weibai was silent for a long time. She looked at Tribulation with respect in her eyes, but more of imperceptible sympathy and pity. "Now," she whispered, "let's go to Reki City." The earth-shattering roar finally passed. But the entire office of the president seemed to be trembling in the huge sound waves. Wang Tianzong was silent. Chen Qinghuan's whole body was shaking uncontrollably. From the first time he saw Li Tianlan, he already knew that he would lose. He did have Wang Tianzong by his side now. Wang Tianzong also supported him to take control of the Snowdance Corps and make Li Tianlan a mere figurehead. But all that was under the condition that Li Tianlan was not awake. Now Li Tianlan was awake. Li Tianlan wanted to kill him. The Snowdance Corps also wanted to kill him. What would Wang Tianzong choose? The most fatal thing was that Chen Qingwan knew very well that he was not Wang Tianzong's confidant. Wang Tianzong had no reason to protect him. Now his only hope of survival depended on whether Wang Tianzong really thought that he, as a chess piece, was useful enough. Wang Tianzong seemed to be weighing the pros and cons. Protecting Chen Qingwan was tantamount to preserving the hope of the Wang family of Beihai to continue to get involved in the Snowdance Corps in the future. If he didn't protect Chen Qingwan, from his standpoint, in addition to needing more energy to control Li Tianlan in the future, the only loss he would suffer was his face. Now he was about to break through. If he broke through successfully, it really didn't matter whether Chen Qingwan was in the Snowdance Corps or not. And if he died, it would be Wang Qinglei's loss. It had nothing to do with him. But was the Sword Emperor's face worthless? Wang Tianzong looked up at Li Tianlan. Li Tianlan stood in front of him with a cold face. In this state, Li Tianlan exuded an almost invincible momentum from head to toe. The essence, qi, and spirit of the entire Snowdance Corps seemed to have been completely integrated with him. Such a Li Tianlan was terrible. It was not his strength that was terrible. It was his fearless sharpness at this moment. Do you want to kill your main deputy? Wang Tianzong narrowed his eyes. I'm just executing military law. Li Tianlan took a step forward. I want to protect him. Wang Tianzong said word by word. No. Li Tianlan's answer was resolute. As he spoke, he took a second step forward. Not everyone is qualified to attack my Snowdance Corps. I respect you as the Sword Emperor of Zhongzhou State. I will pretend that what happened tonight never happened. I can also ignore the purpose of your coming here tonight. But Chen Qingwan doesn't obey military orders. If I want him to die tonight, he must die. The silver light flickered slightly. Falling stars appeared in Li Tianlan's hand. The silver blade was cold and sharp. Li Tianlan took the fourth step and said calmly, I'll see who dares to stop me. The void distorted imperceptibly. A dazzling beam of light suddenly lit up in front of Chen Qingwan. The beam of light illuminated the night, evaporated the wind and rain, and directly blocked Chen Qingwan behind it. Wang Tianzong's eyes became completely cold, with an undisguised hidden anger. Try to kill me. His tone was indifferent. All of a sudden, Li Tianlan laughed wildly. The silver sword light gathered in his hand. At this moment, Li Tianlan gave up all his defense and exposed his body to Wang Tianzong's sword intent. His posture was indescribably wild. Try to kill me. His voice was impassioned. He suddenly sped up and walked directly to Chen Qingwan. The distance between the two was only dozens of meters. Li Tianlan gave up all his defense and strode forward. Wang Tianzong's sword intent was there. As long as he entered the range of the sword intent within 10 meters, Li Tianlan would definitely die. Everyone knew this. But Li Tianlan walked over without flinching. Wang Tianzong stared at Li Tianlan's eyes. Li Tianlan's eyes were as hot as a burning wildfire. His pace was getting faster and faster. 20 meters. 15 meters. 12 meters. Without any defense or retreat, he moved forward all the way. 11 meters. Facing the death line that was enough to kill him in an instant, Li Tianlan did not hesitate and stepped forward. The moment his foot was about to fall, Wang Tianzong's sword intent quietly retreated half a meter. At the same time, Li Tianlan stepped forward again. A drop of sweat flowed down Wang Tianzong's temple and was instantly evaporated. The sword intent kept retreating. Li Tianlan moved forward all the way. Chen Qingwan's whole body was trembling violently. Boom! There was a sudden roar in the night sky in the distance. The night full of wind and rain was illuminated for a moment. A long tail flame directly traversed the night sky. Then there was an earth-shattering explosion and fire. Wang Tianzong suddenly turned around and looked at the place where the explosion sounded. The silver sword intent behind him suddenly exploded, accompanied by Chen Qingwan's desperate scream. The blood rain flew and fell to the ground, and was washed away by the rain. Wang Tianzong still did not look back. Deafening explosions rang out incessantly, and the roars lingered on endlessly. Wang Tianzong was silent for a long time, then slowly turned around, looked at Li Tianlan, and said word by word, "Caesar Hotel?" "Caesar Hotel." Li Tianlan's tone was calm. The Caesar Hotel was full of people from the Shadow Throne. It was also Wang Tianzong's most important ally at this time. Li Tianlan predicted that Qin Qingwan would bring Wang Tianzong here, so he directly sent someone to attack the Caesar Hotel. A cold, killing intent gradually filled Wang Tianzong's eyes. He nodded slowly and said, "Good, very good, but do you think it's too late?" "I think it's too late." Li Tianlan put away the sword edge. Qin Qingwan had become a corpse in front of him. But Wang Tianzong had no time to care about this. In the continuous explosion, he turned directly to the door. Li Tianlan's slow voice sounded behind him, sounding extremely gloomy. "Your Majesty, please wait." Chapter 483. The disaster came all of a sudden. On the night of August 17th, in the cold wind and rain, the Caesar Hotel, which had been calm and luxurious a second ago, burst into flames without warning. With a sharp whistling sound, the cannonball broke through the air, and the long tail flame became the most brilliant light in the night sky. The whole Caesar Hotel was shaking and shaking. The raging fire swept through the whole hotel and was extinguished by the rain, turning into black smoke. The thick and suffocating smoke and dust poured into the hotel along the broken glass. With the hotel as the center, the power of the whole neighborhood was completely cut off. In a short time before the hotel's generator was started, the whole Caesar Hotel became completely chaotic. King Tong, who had just laid down and not fallen asleep, got up and rushed to the window as fast as she could. The entire night sky was almost completely lit up. Shells rained down one after another with an unreasonable momentum. The tail flames were burning. Under the rainy sky, it was as if stars were falling crazily. Amidst the deafening roar, a corner of the luxurious Caesar Hotel was blasted into pieces. Countless stones fell down. Flames and smoke rose in the air. The sound of the stairs cracking could be heard continuously. It was so dense that it was impossible to hear it. In the distance, the neighborhood near Reki City had become an ocean. An ocean of people. A sea of people. Densely packed armies rushed out from every corner. Armored vehicles and even main battle tanks swaggered through the streets. In the distant streets and alleys, trucks transporting soldiers moved forward with indomitable will. Accompanied by artillery fire dancing in the night sky, the entire Caesar Hotel was like a target in the enemy's artillery fire. It was bombarded until it was on the verge of collapse. King Tong's face instantly turned pale. Reki City might now have gathered all the super forces in the Dark World. But there was only one force that could openly use cannonballs, armored vehicles, main battle tanks, and troops to wipe out the enemy. Only the government of Wulan State. And now there was only one person who could order the government of Wulan State. Li Tianlan. King Tong gritted her teeth and suddenly screamed. Phew! An extremely shrill voice appeared in King Tong's sight with an incomparably brilliant light. The light, which seemed to be the color of death, carried an unparalleled aura of danger and instantly occupied all of King Tong's consciousness. King Tong's pupils suddenly contracted, and she screamed with all her might, "Rush out! Leave the hotel!" The incomparably brilliant light in his line of sight suddenly grew larger. The blazing temperature evaporated the wind and rain, and it crashed into the center of the hotel. The entire space suddenly fluctuated, and the huge impact formed a visible airwave. The flames rushed up, and in the loud explosion, the entire hotel kept collapsing. The walls, glass, furniture, steel. The sound of the explosion was earth-shattering. The Caesar Hotel, which had stood in Reki City for many years, completely collapsed. Billowing black smoke and thick smoke and dust flew into the sky, and large pieces of stones fell down like the end of the world. King Tong's figure was also falling. Countless broken stones almost drowned her. She was still able to maintain her balance, and all the boulders that approached her were shattered into powder. The rumbling of the collapsing hotel continued. In the thick smoke and dust, flashes of lightning appeared one after another. There were a lot of thunderbolts. But King Tong's heart kept sinking. The entire Caesar Hotel was filled with people from the Shadow Throne. Even the waiters were the same. This shot had completely destroyed the entire Caesar Hotel, and there would not even be any accidental deaths. Now, there were still many survivors. Compared with the number of people from the Shadow Throne in the Caesar Hotel, the number made King Tong's whole body twitch. She remembered the meeting with Li Tianlan that day. She thought of his eyes. Indifferent, calm, cruel, and vicious. The wind and rain fell on her through the smoke and dust. King Tong suddenly felt that the midsummer in Eastern Europe was really cold. It was so cold that even though she was the queen of the Shadow Throne, she saw the huge shadow on the road ahead at this time. A few spots of light seemed to light up in the huge shadow. The spots of light quickly drew closer. A squadron of fighter jets approached quickly. The perfect streamlined shape of the fighter jets looked extremely strange and cold. King Tong opened her domain with all her strength. The moment the domain spread, the fighter jets, which had become clear, suddenly opened fire. The intensive sound of the machine guns rang out without interruption in the explosion and the loud sound of falling. In an instant, the whole night sky seemed to be sparkling with sparks. The sparks were swift and fierce, blotting out the sky and covering the earth. It was completely like a rainstorm. Tens of thousands of bullets desperately swept the ruins of the Caesar Hotel. Blood and screams echoed in the ruins. Outside the ruins of the hotel, the army was pressing on. There was no room for any of this. Kill them all. Please stay, Your Majesty. Li Tianlan's voice was very light, but it was extremely gloomy. As his voice rang out, footsteps could be heard all around the courtyard of the presidential palace. Please stay, Your Majesty. Cool breeze and drifting cloud appeared in the east. Please stay, Your Majesty. Li Zhonghu and Sun Mengran appeared in the west. Please stay, Your Majesty. Hua Qingfeng, the sect leader of the Shadow Sect, appeared in the south. Please stay, Your Majesty. Li Wangxing, the lieutenant general of 9 regions, appeared in the north. More and more people appeared in different positions. Dozens of people, hundreds of people, were densely packed. Everyone completely surrounded the courtyard, including Wang Tianzong. Please stay, Your Majesty. This was everyone's voice. Wang Tianzong frowned tightly. The explosions kept ringing in the distance. The huge roar was like the thunder that swept through the whole city. Tonight, Reki City was in turmoil again. Wang Tianzong looked in the direction of the Caesar Hotel. He saw the shells whistling in the night sky. He saw the fighter planes hovering in the night sky. The smell of gunpowder seemed to have spread over, and the aura of killing and death was looming. Wang Tianzong slowly turned around and looked at Li Tianlan. His eyes were calm. But his calm coat seemed to be gradually falling off. In this state, Wang Tianzong seemed to have completely turned into a sword, with shocking sharpness. Li Tianlan looked into Wang Tianzong's eyes. His eyes were calm too. He was calm all over. Calm, tranquil, and far away. You won't let me go? Wang Tianzong asked. The Caesar Hotel was less than a few kilometers away from him. In the Caesar Hotel, his most important ally was being attacked and even slaughtered. He attacked a superpower with absolute military force. What was more fatal was that all the people of the Shadow Throne were still gathered together. Wang Tianzong didn't even dare to imagine the ending of the Shadow Throne tonight. Please stay, Your Majesty. Li Tianlan said softly. Chen Qinghuan's body fell at his feet, and the blood was still flowing. He seemed to have completely calmed down, and there was no longer any aggressiveness. If Your Majesty is willing to do me the honor, how about I invite Your Majesty to have a cup of tea? Who is in the Caesar Hotel? Wang Tianzong suddenly asked. As soon as he asked this question, he thought of the scene in front of the door. Qin Shilai? Only Prime Minister Riker could command the army. Riker was Li Tianlan's man. Everything in the Caesar Hotel must be Li Tianlan's doing. This was something that Li Tianlan himself admitted. Qin Shilai had just gone out. At this time, He should be close to the Caesar Hotel. There was no doubt that this dark sword master, who had the strength to enter the divine list, would be the most important force to contain King Tong. I don't know. Li Tianlan said softly, I only know that Reki City is not peaceful tonight, so I have given an order in advance. No one, including myself, is allowed to enter tonight and not leave. It's not against your majesty, but I need to be responsible for Zhongzhou State. Wang Tianzong sneered, and his voice suddenly became stern. The Shadow Throne is Zhongzhou State's partner. Li Tianlan, are you killing Zhongzhou State's ally now? Zhongzhou State's partner? Li Tianlan's voice became cold. Your Majesty, you seem to have forgotten your position. Ask yourself, do you stand here on behalf of Beihai or Zhongzhou State? What does it mean for me to stand here? Between you and me, who can better represent Zhongzhou State? He suddenly turned around, walked to his bedroom and said coldly, Ally? I've been in Eastern Europe for a few days, but I've never seen the so-called cooperation agreement between Zhongzhou State and the Shadow Throne. Where did the ally come from? Is the Shadow Throne an ally of Zhongzhou State or of you, Wang Tianzong? Have you already formed an alliance with the Shadow Throne on behalf of Zhongzhou State? Your Majesty, do you really have this qualification? Wang Tianzong looked at Li Tianlan's back as he left. At this moment, his expression was still calm, but his heart was already surging wildly. He finally found that he had done something wrong. Li Tianlan was very young. His realm was very low. His combat capability was ordinary. Wang Tianzong called him Marshal Li, but deep down in his heart he had never thought much of Li Tianlan. Eastern Europe was in chaos. He forced Li Tianlan to come to Eastern Europe. Then he killed him. Everything was over. That was what Wang Tianzong thought from beginning to end. But at this moment, he realized how subtle Li Tianlan's identity as a marshal was. He stood on the side of the general trend. He was a marshal. No matter how young he was, at least in Eastern Europe, he was qualified to be his opponent. Aren't you afraid that I'll kill you? Wang Tianzong raised his eyebrows gradually. Li Tianlan paused and turned to look at Wang Tianzong. I don't believe it, he said. At this moment, Wang Tianzong really felt his anger. He looked at Li Tianlan and then around. The entire office of the president had been under martial law. In the current situation, it was not Li Tianlan who asked him to stay. It was the entire Snowdance Corps who asked him to stay. If Wang Tianzong broke in, the entire Snowdance Corps would fight to keep him here. Wang Tianzong thought that he could go out. But if things got to that point, how could the Wang family of Beihai live in Zhongzhou State? This was the general trend. Li Tianlan stood in the general trend and suppressed people with his power. Even though Wang Tianzong was the Sword Emperor, he had to weigh it. He couldn't kill Li Tianlan for the Shadow Throne. Nor could he break out of the encirclement and fight against the Snowdance Corps for the Shadow Throne. This was the most basic principle and bottom line. If Wang Tianzong moved, he would commit treason tonight. Is this considered luring the tiger away from the mountain? Wang Tianzong suddenly asked. Li Tianlan twitched the corner of his mouth and said nothing. But are you sure you can succeed tonight? There was a flash of mockery in Wang Tianzong's eyes. He was here, which meant that Li Tianlan temporarily imprisoned him here with the general trend. But it didn't mean that he couldn't do anything else. Wang Tianzong took out a very small instrument from his arms and pressed the button. The colorful lights on the button kept flashing. Li Tianlan narrowed his eyes and looked at the instrument in Wang Tianzong's hand. Wang Tianzong directly threw the instrument in his hand over and said flatly, "Have you ever seen this thing?" Li Tianlan reached out to take it and looked down at the instrument in front of him. The instrument barrel was dark and there was a devil's head painted on it. Li Tianlan had never seen such a thing. But he knew that it was definitely one of Wang Tianzong's backup plans. He casually threw the instrument to Wang Tianzong, then took out a medal from his arms and threw it to Wang Tianzong. Have you ever seen this thing? Li Tianlan calmly asked the same question as Wang Tianzong. Chapter 484. Wang Tianzong looked down at the medal in his hand. Their positions were the same in the general direction. Wang Tianzong couldn't attack Li Tianlan blatantly. Li Tianlan also didn't dare to do anything to Wang Tianzong. To some extent, the confrontation between the two hovered at the bottom line of the crime of treason. Between advancing and retreating, it was either the sea and the sky or the cliff. Their positions invisibly smoothed out the huge gap between Wang Tianzong and Li Tianlan's strength. So in everyone's eyes, when the two really began to fight, it was also the time to show their trump cards one by one. The instrument he threw to Li Tianlan was his trump card. And the metal Li Tianlan threw to him was also Li Tianlan's trump card. The metal was extremely delicate and small, pure black, but there was a faint white line running through the whole black in the middle. Wang Tianzong looked at the metal and was silent for a long time. He knew that Li Tianlan would not see the instrument in his hand. But he had seen Li Tianlan's medal. This was the medal that Li Tianlan wore on his chest in the final battle of Heaven Capital. This medal symbolized an identity that could not be ignored in Zhongzhou State. Young governor of Sai City. Wang Tianzong frowned and glanced at Li Tianlan. In the almost frozen atmosphere, he suddenly said, "Not enough. How do you know if you don't try?" Li Tianlan stood where he was and looked at Wang Tianzong with unyielding eyes. The roaring explosion outside crossed a distance of several kilometers, as if it were close to his ears. Wang Tianzong thought silently for a while. He really miscalculated tonight, but he didn't lose in strategy. No one could have imagined that Li Tianlan's injury would recover so quickly. In other words, from the moment Li Tianlan opened his eyes, it meant that Wang Tianzong lost. Because Qin Qinghuan could not give up the power of the Snowdance Corps. Wang Tianzong could not give up the Snowdance Corps either. So when he was invited by Qin Qinghuan to preside over the overall situation, many forces in the dark of Reki City took advantage of his absence to target the Shadow Throne. Li Tianlan made a trap with his own injury, and now he used the general trend to imprison him here. As for the result, Wang Tianzong was unwilling to think about it. If Li Tianlan had not been absolutely sure, he would never have acted so decisively tonight. So after tonight, the Shadow Throne might be destined to suffer heavy losses. And this might have been the result that Li Tianlan met King Tong for the first time on the day he was in a coma. Wang Tianzong looked around again. He was surrounded by all the experts that the Snowdance Corps could bring out. Outside the office of the president, the Snowdance Corps had begun to gather. The glaring white searchlights kept spinning in the air, and the sound of helicopters rang out in the night sky. All the weapons of the Snowdance Corps were ready for battle. As long as Li Tianlan gave the order, the entire office of the president would be razed to the ground in the shortest time. Such a battle array could not trap Wang Tianzong. If it were other countries, Wang Tianzong could break out of the encirclement by himself with his sword. In his current realm, he would not even be injured. But at this time, he was surrounded by the army of Zhongzhou State. And the foreign troops he wanted to kill the most were besieging the Shadow Throne. So Wang Tianzong could move, but he could not. He couldn't kill them, so he couldn't get out. This round was truly perfect, almost flawless. Wang Tianzong glanced at Li Tianlan. Li Tianlan stood there quietly, calm and peaceful. But vaguely, Wang Tianzong saw something different in him. It was the flow of time. The sound was the track of growth, and it was the taste that gradually became dark. Wang Tianzong saw a lot of things which seemed to be familiar. He had seen this kind of taste on Li Guangtu back then, and even on himself. Everyone who stood at the peak of the dark world had this kind of taste. It was the indifference and prudence, gloominess and coldness, awe-inspiring and majesty that had been honed in countless saber lights and sword shadows. This was the so-called fierce and ambitious person. For the first time, Wang Tianzong admitted from the bottom of his heart that Li Tianlan was terrible. The most important thing was that his growth rate in all aspects was so amazing, as if he was born to belong to the dark world. Wang Tianzong suddenly appreciated Li Tianlan. He appreciated him sincerely. This kind of appreciation was very sincere, and because of this sincerity, the killing intent behind this kind of appreciation seemed more naked. "You want to kill me?" Li Tianlan looked at Wang Tianzong and asked calmly. "Do you really want to stop me?" Wang Tianzong asked. This sentence, combined with Li Tianlan's previous question, carried an extremely naked sense of threat. Everyone's heart sank. At this time, it is the army of Wulan state that is fighting outside. Prime Minister Riker discussed it with me before. They have confirmed that some terrorists are hiding in the Caesar Hotel, so they went to encircle and suppress them. As friends of Wulan state, we can't interfere in the internal affairs of Wulan state. Li Tianlan said calmly, so I want to ask your majesty to stay in the office of the president for a few more days. Wang Tianzong couldn't help laughing. Li Tianlan's serious nonsense completely infuriated him. With his smile, the space around Wang Tianzong became distorted at a speed visible to the naked eye. The space was constantly twisted and broken, and a bit of thick darkness with sword intent continued to gather in front of him. Lights, night, wind and rain. Everything was completely absorbed by that bit of thick darkness. In the darkness that could not be seen, Li Tianlan stood there. His eyes were hazy as if they were filled with mist. A faint white mist surged on him. The mist was very weak, but it became the only light in the absolute darkness. Everyone began to gather in the direction of the mist. There was more and more mist, and it spread farther and farther. Wang Tianzong suddenly frowned. Everyone was completely wrapped in his dark sword intent, and he himself was also wrapped in the white mist. His vision was a blur. Everyone else's sight was full of darkness. The only thing they had in common was that neither of them could see anything. Li Tianlan's voice sounded through the mist, slow and clear. Please think twice, Your Majesty. Now the general trend of Zhongzhou state is in my hands. If Your Majesty draws your sword, have you really thought about the general trend of the Wang family of Beihai? Wang Tianzong did not respond, but the thick dark sword intent around him began to slowly retreat. The vast white mist also began to disappear. Lights, wind and rain, explosions, and the office of the president reappeared in everyone's perception. Wang Tianzong was still standing there. He looked at Li Tianlan and was silent for a long time. Dragon vein? He suddenly asked. Vaguely, he seemed to understand what Li Tianlan meant by saying that the general trend of Zhongzhou state was in his hands. Li Tianlan carried the dragon vein. He was equivalent to carrying the destiny of the entire Zhongzhou state. If he was strong, Zhongzhou state was strong. If Zhongzhou state was strong, he was strong. With a huge amount of fate blessing him, Li Tianlan, in this state, was completely unique in all aspects. You actually know how to use the dragon vein? Wang Tianzong asked again. Li Tianlan was silent. No one knew what the dragon vein was. Even if he carried the dragon vein, he did not know what it was. But it was certainly not a weapon. If it was not a weapon, how could it be used? Even Li Tianlan was puzzled by the appearance of the white mist. He could not give Wang Tianzong any explanation at all. Li Tianlan took a step forward, looked at Wang Tianzong and said, Your Majesty, please. He did not ask him to go out. Instead, he asked him to go in. Wang Tianzong restrained his sword intent, which completely proved that he had completely recovered his calmness. It also showed that Wang Tianzong had completely accepted the failure tonight. Even if the failure this time could be said to be extremely heavy. Tonight, Li Tianlan had taken enough advantage, so he did not care about his attitude. At this time, when talking to Wang Tianzong, he suddenly became very respectful. Wang Tianzong looked at him with a smile and suddenly said, Do you think you will win tonight? Li Tianlan raised his eyebrows. As I said, your trump card is not enough. Wang Tianzong said calmly. He threw the medal representing the identity of the young governor of Sai City to Li Tianlan again. Li Tianlan's face changed. He reached out his hand and silently put the medal on his chest. After a moment of silence, he said blandly, If it's not enough, I'll play another card. Wang Tianzong looked at Li Tianlan and seemed to be observing the truth of his words. Li Tianlan's expression was flat, making it impossible to see through his emotions. Wang Tianzong sighed softly. At least in terms of hiding his emotions, Li Tianlan did not lose to some old foxes in the dark world. Where is my room? Wang Tianzong said calmly. When he said this, he seemed to feel his heart twitch. Thinking of the situation after tonight, a trace of killing intent flashed through his eyes again. Your Majesty, if you don't mind, you can live next to me. Li Tianlan said slowly, as if he was not aware of Wang Tianzong's killing intent. He took the lead to turn around and lead the way. Wang Tianzong stood there for a while. The sword intent around him disappeared completely. The wind and rain all over the sky fell on him, and his body was soon completely soaked. The summer rain in Eastern Europe was cold. In the cold rain, Wang Tianzong seemed to have figured something out. His body completely relaxed, and he followed Li Tianlan calmly. The experts of the Snowdance Corps stayed in place and looked at each other for a while. Cool breeze and drifting cloud coughed and left the office of the president first. Imprisoning Wang Tianzong was the most important step in tonight's plan. But it was not the whole plan. Everything about the Snowdance Corps was the real key. When the experts of the Snowdance Corps left the office of the president, Li Tianlan, with a calm expression, also arranged a room for Wang Tianzong. The army of the Snowdance Corps was still gathering and paying close attention to every move of the office of the president. After confirming that Wang Tianzong could not leave, Li Tianlan took Dongcheng Rushi back to his residence. Dongcheng Rushi gently closed the door. Li Tianlan sat in the chair, poured himself a full cup of herbal tea, and drank it in one gulp. Dongcheng Rushi clearly saw that Li Tianlan's face, which had been ruddy just now, suddenly became a little pale. As he drank the tea, his forehead was already covered with cold sweat. "I want to take a shower and change my clothes." Li Tianlan took a deep breath and said with a bitter smile. Only he knew that at this moment, the cold sweat on his back had completely soaked his military uniform. "What's wrong?" Dongcheng Rushi came over and reached out to touch Li Tianlan's forehead. Li Tianlan reached out to hold her hand and shook his head. "It's okay. I'm just scared." Fix. Chapter 485. For anyone, death was something uncontrollable and irresistible. Li Tianlan was not afraid of being in a desperate situation, but he was really afraid of death. Death was not just endless darkness for him. He was sure that if he died, the people living around him would probably live a life worse than death. That was what scared him from the bottom of his heart. Facing Jiang Chenyan, Jiang Chensong, Black Ghost, and King Tong, Li Tianlan could be fearless. Being in a desperate situation did not mean that there was no room for struggle. Being able to struggle meant that there was infinite hope. When his dual wind and thunder veins were still intact, his final sword move could also give him the confidence to turn the tables on most occasions. But facing Wang Tianzong was different. The confrontation in the office of the president did not last long, but once Wang Tianzong's killing intent rose, it meant death for Li Tianlan. He was powerless to resist. In Wang Tianzong's current realm, he did not even need to use all his strength to make Li Tianlan disappear in an instant. Li Tianlan was sure of that. Even if he was intact, even if his dual wind and thunder veins were not damaged, even if he had the final sword move with the eternal silence of mountains and rivers as the starting move, he still could not withstand Wang Tianzong's killing intent. Li Tianlan could now see the end of martial arts. This was a very rare occurrence. But at the same time, it was a very sad thing. Because he could see his position clearly, and Wang Tianzong, who was infinitely close to the end, he knew very well how far he was from Wang Tianzong. For Li Tianlan, the distance was very long. If he wanted to get closer, maybe only time was needed. But for Wang Tianzong, the distance was very short. He only needed one sword move to make the distance between him and Li Tianlan disappear, and even Li Tianlan himself disappear. So for a long time, although Li Tianlan did not dislike Wang Tianzong, he did not like him either. The Sword Emperor of Zhongzhou State left more than just a great reputation in the dark world. At least for Li Tianlan, every time Wang Tianzong appeared in his sight, it meant that his life was under Wang Tianzong's control. That was a really bad feeling. Li Tianlan subconsciously lifted the teapot beside him. The teapot was very light. Dongcheng Rushi silently poured him a cup of purified water. Li Tianlan took it and drank it in one gulp. The cold sweat on his body increased, but as the cool pure water entered his stomach, he became relaxed. Li Tianlan lit a cigarette, lost in thought. On the night of the great change in Wulan State, he borrowed deity's sword energy with his sword intent and had a chance to seriously injure Wang Tianzong. So he thought that Wang Tianzong should thank him for his reason. Now, He was also grateful for Wang Tianzong's rationality. Li Tianlan took a big drag on his cigarette and remained silent for a long time. Wang Tianzong was bold. No one dared to doubt this. If the Sword Emperor didn't have the courage to kill, wouldn't he be a joke? Therefore, there were too many choices in the short confrontation just now. He was the marshal of Zhongzhou State and the commander of the Snowdance Corps. Wang Tianzong did not dare to kill him. But that didn't mean he didn't dare to kill him. At least in the current situation, if Wang Tianzong really killed him with a sword just now, he might be able to bear the consequences in a short time. Li Tianlan knew his own value, but only the living were valuable. If he died in Eastern Europe, all the expectations placed on him would be in vain. The academics would abandon the Li family as soon as possible. Sai City's position was unclear. The Dongqing clan might do something, but the entire giant group would not fight desperately with the Wang family of Beihai. As for the reason? Because he was already dead. In a short time, Zhongzhou State needed Wang Tianzong. Even with his strength, the Wang family of Beihai would still be as stable as Mount Tai. However, killing the marshal of Zhongzhou State was a felony after all. Such a crime was enough to plant a thorn in the heart of the whole Zhongzhou State. This thorn might not have any consequences when Wang Tianzong was alive, but when he was old or died, today's cause would become tomorrow's effect. A family that dared to openly kill its marshal, no matter how deep-rooted it was bound to be eliminated. Therefore, Wang Tianzong was very rational, and he had a long-term vision. Now the confrontation was over, and he imprisoned Wang Tianzong. At this moment, everything seemed to be reasonable. But for Li Tianlan, the scene just now really made him feel like he was wandering between the gate of hell and the gate of hell. Dongqing Rushi picked a new set of clothes for Li Tianlan. Li Tianlan took the brand-new military uniform, but did not move it. "Shall I go and fill it?" Dongqing Rushi said obediently. Li Tianlan nodded and then shook his head. He was still in shock. Finally, he said with a bitter smile, "Do you think I'm as timid as a mouse and afraid of death?" Dongqing Rushi found a wet towel and gently wiped Li Tianlan's face. "I'm very happy that you're afraid of death. Everyone is afraid of death. It's not a shameful thing. Only when you're alive can you better protect the Dongqing clan in the future. My father once told me that when a person is in a high position, he can choose his bottom line, principles, good and evil, but he can't give up his life." Dongqing Rushi's voice was soft. She quietly stared at Li Tianlan's face and said softly, "You were afraid in the afternoon, right? When you heard about Carlos, you were afraid." Li Tianlan took a deep breath and said, "From this afternoon, I thought that if I died here, the people around me might end up more miserable than Carlos. This is what I have to carry on the way up." On this road, the measure of going to heaven or going to hell is not good or evil, but victory or defeat. Li Tianlan paused and repeated again, "It's victory or defeat. You'll win." Dongqing Rushi squatted in front of Li Tianlan and looked up at him. Her face was incomparably beautiful. Li Tianlan subconsciously reached out his hand and touched her face, but his eyes looked in the direction of the next door. Next door? It was Wang Tianzong's residence. In the following time, if there was no accident, Li Tianlan would keep him imprisoned here until the chaos in Eastern Europe was over. But in the chaos, the most likely thing to happen was an accident. Li Tianlan frowned. In a sense, he did something that had never been done in the Dark World tonight. He successfully imprisoned the Sword Emperor of Zhongzhou State. This kind of humiliation was enough to turn into invincible anger. Li Tianlan didn't know how much Wang Tianzong hated himself now. But he knew very well how afraid he was of Wang Tianzong. This might be the only opponent in this life that made him fear from the bottom of his soul. Opponent? Li Tianlan looked down at the military uniform on him. In this military uniform, he was Wang Tianzong's opponent. Without this military uniform, what was he? He stood up and stretched his body casually. The fiery sword intent instantly evaporated all the sweat on his body. Li Tianlan smiled. His face was still pale, but there was a touch of indescribable meaning in his smile. "I suddenly find that I hate Wang Tianzong a little." Dongqing Rushi stood up and pulled Li Tianlan's hand without saying anything. Li Tianlan's eyes turned out of the window. His gaze seemed to cross the square in front of the office of the president, the nearby blocks, and fell in front of the Caesar Hotel not far away. The roaring explosion shook the whole city. The bloody and chilling atmosphere came faintly. Li Tianlan looked into the distance and whispered, "Things in Eastern Europe should end soon." The chaos in Eastern Europe was his first battle on the stage of the Dark World. The timing was perfect. What was even more perfect was that he seized the opportunity and also improved his status. But all of this now, none of it was his own, including the Snowdance Corps. After the chaos in Eastern Europe ended and he returned to China to report on his work, the future of the Snowdance Corps had always been a very sensitive issue in Zhongzhou State. So everything he had now was illusory, except for his own force. And he wanted it to be real. His country was in Tiannan, which was extremely real. That was what he was most likely to have in his own hands. Even if it was in the frontier, as long as it belonged to him, every inch of land looked extremely beautiful and magnificent. Li Tianlan glanced at Dongqing Rushi and suddenly said, "After returning to China, I'll take you to the south, okay? I'll go wherever you go." Dongqing Rushi replied seriously. Li Tianlan smiled gently. "My sister and I will help you," Dongqing Rushi whispered. Dongqing Rushi whispered. She suddenly remembered that she had also called Wang Yuetong's sister, and Wang Yuetong seemed to be in an awkward position now. But Dongqing Rushi naturally would not take the initiative to mention this problem, so she calmly corrected her. "It's Sister Little Bai." Li Tianlan murmured softly, and his tone was like a sigh. The chaos in Eastern Europe was becoming more and more obvious. He felt more and more the limitations of this era on him. So he had vaguely understood Qin Weibai's ultimate purpose. Today's era might be in chaos because of her, and it would also die because of her. But in the end, who would it be because of? "She's also a silly woman," Li Tianlan whispered. Dongqing Rushi wrinkled her nose and didn't speak. "When we settle down in Tiannan, I'll keep you at home, plant flowers, walk dogs, go shopping, and do whatever you want." With his lack of imagination and understanding of today's upper class, the life of the so-called rich wife that he could think of was probably carefree shopping, planting flowers, and walking dogs. Dongqing Rushi shook her head and whispered, "It's so vulgar." "But I just like it." Li Tianlan laughed. In the constant roar of the huge explosion, his laughter seemed to be particularly warm. Dongqing Rushi moved a little closer. Li Tianlan naturally held her in his arms. The door next door rang. Wang Tianzong, who was destined to be sleepless tonight, walked out and looked in the direction of the explosion. He couldn't see anything, but he stood there for a long time. Li Tianlan's eyes narrowed, and he suddenly thought of the instrument that Wang Tianzong had thrown to him before. Do you know what instrument Wang Tianzong was holding in his hand at that time? Li Tianlan lowered his head and asked. They were very close. Li Tianlan moved closer and almost touched Dongqing Rushi's ear. Dongqing Rushi's little face was flushed, and she was as beautiful as a flower. She muttered to herself, "That devil is so ugly." Devil? Devil? Li Tianlan suddenly thought of something. He took out his mobile phone. The phone was quiet. He still hadn't received a call from Prime Minister Riker. Li Tianlan dialed a number. The moment he waited for the phone to be connected, he thought of the extremely mysterious devil troop of the Wang family of Beihai, which only appeared in legends. And this legend seemed to be about to become a reality tonight. Li Tianlan also thought of Jiang Shangyu, who made tea with the rain on the Huangpu riverboat in Huading that day. That seemed to be the first time he had heard the exact news about the devil troop. Not a legend. So he dialed Jiang Shangyu's phone at this time. Chapter 486. In any era, even the real chosen one could not occupy the light that could illuminate the whole dark world alone. For Li Tianlan, from a student to a marshal, it was a step to the sky after a good preparation. The final maneuver of the two academies of Zhongzhou State helped Li Tianlan. But this was the dullest and highest quality maneuver in recent years, and the loser also had his own light. With the grudge between the Li family and the Wang family of Beihai, facing an opponent who was already ahead of him, Wang Xingxiao, who dared to take the initiative to lower his realm, was undoubtedly the most dazzling young man besides Li Tianlan. After the final maneuver, Wang Xianxia directly fell from the peak of the thunder-shocking realm to the fire-flaming realm. Under the circumstance that his realm fell by 1,000 miles, the whole Zhongzhou state paid more attention to the heir of the Wang family of Beihai. Judging from Wang Xianxiao's current performance, everyone agreed that his current strength had surpassed that of the young Wang Tianzong. In terms of potential, Wang Xianxiao, who had the wind and thunder veins, was even better than his father. As for his courage, his retreat from the peak of the thunder-shocking realm to the peak of the fire-flaming realm was enough to explain everything. Hard work? Wang Xianxiao reached such a realm at the age of 25. If he didn't work hard, even if he had 10 wind and thunder veins, he wouldn't be able to get to where he was now. So in many people's hearts, even if Li Tianlan could sweep the dark world and become the chosen one of the present age in the next few decades, Wang Xianxiao's final achievement might not be much worse than Li Tianlan's. Now even many people agreed that Wang Xianxiao's final achievement would surpass his father. This was not blind speculation. It followed the development law of the Wang family of Beihai. Throughout the dark world, the patriarch of the Wang family of Beihai could be said to be the most dazzling position. This was a great family that had always been in the top position for hundreds of years. How tough the shoulders needed to bear such a glorious glory. Everyone had something to carry. Mount Dibing and Beihai province were the weight that always pressed on the shoulders of the patriarch of the Wang family of Beihai. Such a huge weight would make every heir of the Wang family of Beihai crazily become stronger. The more glorious they were, the more afraid they were. Therefore, for hundreds of years, the patriarchs of the Wang family of Beihai were not necessarily wise masters of great talent and strategy, but they were definitely experts at the peak, without exception. Now, with the passage of time, Wang Tianzong, who already knew his destiny, would soon enter his 60s. The Sword Emperor was approaching the end of his peak state. Behind him was the Wang family of Beihai. Outside Beihai, the Li family had quietly staged a comeback. Li Tianlan, who was 22 years old, advanced triumphantly. He was so talented that he could be called unparalleled in the world. Under such circumstances, what Wang Xianxiao felt was definitely enough to suffocate him. Under such great pressure, it was not surprising that Wang Xianxiao would eventually reach any height. Now everyone recognized Li Tianlan's strength and potential. Most people believed that Zhongzhou State and the Dark World would belong to Li Tianlan and Wang Xianxiao in the future. In addition to the two of them, the young master of Kunlun City, Gu Hanshan, who had the Heavenly King's new body, was also dazzling. But after the final maneuver, the brilliance of the young heavenly sun on him was constantly fading, while the other person became more and more important in everyone's eyes, shining like a rising star. It was not Lin Yuxian, the almost unknown young master of the Lin clan. It was a name that used to stand at a high place, but was always a little short of the young heavenly sun. Jiang Shangyu. Everyone knew that Jiang Shangyu was very strong. But no one knew why he was strong. In the past few years, he had been silently walking behind several young heavenly suns. His combat capability was a little short, and his progress was a little short. He rarely had any outstanding achievements. Until the battle of the final maneuver. A Jiang Shangyu who had already determined his future path. A Jiang Shangyu who would steadily enter the invincible realm in the future. A brilliant feat. Such a path and such a style of doing things were too familiar. Perhaps no one said anything explicitly, but such a Jiang Shangyu did hit the hearts of every high-level official of Zhongzhou State hard. Because many years ago, there was also a young man like Jiang Shangyu today. He was silent, gentle, low-key, and did not compete. He silently walked behind several top geniuses. His combat capability was slightly poor, and his progress was slightly poor. But his footsteps were extremely stable, so stable that he had never stopped until today. Several top geniuses of his generation had left the peak of the era for various reasons, but he was still walking forward step by step. He staggered, but with the power that made the world awe. His name was Wang Tianzong, the current Sword Emperor of Zhongzhou State. Wang Xianxiao was Wang Tianzong's son. but Jiang Shangyu's path was so similar to Wang Tianzong's. His performance in the final maneuver completely suppressed Gu Han's Han. At least in the hearts of many people now, Jiang Shangyu's future was more valued and worth looking forward to than Gu Hanshan's. Li Tianlan, Wang Xingxiao, and Jiang Shangyu. The three most popular young people in Zhongzhou State now, as the maneuver of the two academies of Zhongzhou State came to an end, they finally chose two completely different paths. The chaos in Eastern Europe broke out. Li Tianlan led the army north and caused great changes in Wulan State. On the date of death, he killed two invincible realm experts in a day and captured Wulan State, which Zhongzhou State had been thinking about all the time for 20 years. Li Tianlan's name resounded throughout the dark world, like the sun at high noon. But Wang Xingxiao and Jiang Shangyu were completely silent. There was no news of Wang Xingxiao at all. It was said that Jiang Shangyu had been recuperating in Beijiang, but no one had seen him except his biological father, Jiang Shan. But on the night of August 17th in Eastern Europe, in the morning light of August 18th in Zhongzhou State, Jiang Shangyu's figure did appear in a small manor of the Jiang family in Jiang City. The sun was shining brightly in Jiang City. The warm sunlight shone on Jiang Shangyu's body, and his whole body seemed to be plated with a layer of gold. Jiang Shangyu held his mobile phone and looked at the flowers in the manor. The flowers were in full bloom, and the night had just passed. In the early morning, the petals of each flower were full of vitality with hazy moisture. Jiang Shangyu, whose face was still a little pale, looked at the flowers in front of him with joy and gladness in his eyes. Jiang Shan, the head of Beijiang province, came over from behind. He looked at his son, who was reaching out to play with the flowers, and asked, "Who called?" Li Tianlan. Jiang Shangyu turned around and said. Jiang Shan raised his eyebrows and seemed a little surprised. Jiang Shangyu thought of his call with Li Tianlan just now and shook his head with a smile. The call between the two of them did not last long. Li Tianlan simply asked about the devil troop. Jiang Shangyu said that what he knew was limited, and he had already said what he should say. Naturally, he could not give any clues now. Li Tianlan did not say much and simply hung up the phone. No pleasantries, no probing, and straight to the point. It seemed that the life-and-death fight in the final maneuver not long ago had become a grudge that gradually faded away and eventually disappeared without a trace. Jiang Shangyu thought quietly and suddenly said, "Reki City may be very lively tonight. Do you have news?" Jiang Shan asked. Jiang Shangyu shook his head. "It's Li Tianlan. He asked me about the devil troop." The devil troop had always been a legend in the outside world. The so-called legend was something that did not necessarily exist. If he had not really seen or encountered something, Li Tianlan would not have called him to ask about the devil troop in detail. Because they were not familiar with each other. And Li Tianlan did not like to listen to stories. Jiang Shan's eyes narrowed, and a touch of fear flashed through his eyes. The Jiang family could confirm the existence of the devil troop. The invincible realm expert of the Jiang family had died in the hands of the devil troop. Otherwise, the current Jiang clan would be even more powerful and frightening. Jiang Shan thought silently for a while and then asked, "How are your injuries?" "Not bad." Jiang Shangyu smiled and said, "I took a step forward to deal with the final maneuver. As for taking 2 steps back, it's a small matter. To be honest, in the final maneuver, I was going to imitate Wang Xingxiao. If I could retreat from the thunder-shocking realm to the fire-flaming realm that day, my foundation might become more terrible now." "How is that possible?" Jiang Shan shook his head. Jiang Shangyu was 4 years older than Li Tianlan and 1 year older than Wang Xingxiao. He was already 26 years old this year. His martial arts realm progress was not fast, but at the age of 22 he had already stepped into the peak of the fire-flaming realm. From the peak of the fire-flaming realm to the thunder-shocking realm, Jiang Shangyu had polished this small realm for 4 years. This was what it meant to be well prepared. His foundation in the fire-flaming realm was unimaginably solid. Even if he really wanted to drop his realm, it was impossible for him to return to the fire-flaming realm. In the final maneuver, he also chose to drop his realm. But compared with Wang Xingxiao, He could only barely take a step back, which was considered a solid foundation. You know, nothing is impossible in martial arts. It's just that we haven't found the right way or we don't have enough luck. Jiang Shangyu put away his mobile phone and quietly stared at the not-so-dazzling sunshine on the horizon. In the bright light, he stood there, and his outline was extremely deep. In fact, you don't have to pursue perfection. Jiang Shan looked at Jiang Shangyu, the son who had made him so satisfied that he could not be more satisfied. He knew his character and his ability, but he also knew his ambition. It was ridiculous to have ambition without ability. It was sad to have ability but ambition. He had ability and ambition, but he didn't have enough resources. What was this? Jiang Shan had mixed feelings. He reached out and patted his son on the shoulder, saying in a heavy voice, "You are very good now, really good." Jiang Shangyu reached out and held Jiang Shan's hand. He chuckled softly and warmly. "Dad, what I want is not very good. I've seen through the word good a long time ago. It's meaningless. The higher you go, the less people think they are good. What I'm pursuing is not very good. What I'm pursuing is just not worse than others." He paused and continued with a smile, "Not worse than anyone else. Li Tianlan, Wang Xingxiao, Gu Hanshan. Why can't I do what they can? They can go up step by step with resources. Our Jiang family doesn't have so many resources. But when they only look at the road ahead, I can bend down and even kneel down. I will dig out the resources I need little by little. In this way, I may go slower, but I won't miss anything. I will reach the end one day. I'm not worse than anyone else, and the Jiang family will not be worse than any other family. You are my son." Jiang Shan said in a low voice, "Of course you're not worse than anyone else. It's me. I'm not capable as a father. Enough." Jiang Shangyu smiled and patted his father's hand on his shoulder. He said softly, "It's really enough. Dad, do you know who I admire the most in my life?" Jiang Shan didn't speak, but a few names that could turn the world upside down in the dark world flashed through his mind. They were all real strong people. "I admire you the most." Jiang Shangyu said softly, "Your realm is not invincible, and your position in the decision-making committee is ordinary. But you are my father. Our Jiang family doesn't have so many resources, but our Jiang family has been moving up and getting stronger and stronger. You bow your head, bend your waist, and be careful. You are a high-level official, but you live a humble life. But everyone in the Jiang family has never felt inferior, and I don't either. Dad, to be honest, you don't have to give me too many things because you've given me a lot. I've been very stable since I was a child. Stability is the best. Maybe with your status, you can't give me more things, but that's not what I need. You've done enough. The Jiang family and I can have today all depend on you. So I don't envy the Sword Emperor Wang Tianzong who is invincible, the god of war Gu Xingyun who is domineering, and the Li family Li Honghe who is selfless. In my heart, only my father is the greatest and the most worthy of my worship." Jiang Shan felt the temperature of his son's palm and closed his eyes slightly. The sun illuminated his slightly white temples, and the wrinkles at the corners of his eyes trembled slightly. "Dad, next, leave the Jiang family to me. Our Jiang family is a process from nothing to something. We can have nothing, but the men of the Jiang family have a clear conscience about the family and their children in this life. I'll do what you can't do. Even if I can't do it, I'll have a son. I hope I'll become the person my son admires the most, take over what I can't do, and continue to do." Jiang Shangyu held his father's palm tightly and whispered, "Everything will be fine. Stability is the best." Jiang Shan whispered. Jiang Shangyu was silent for a moment, and then smiled. How can stability be achieved without reaching the peak? The peak was supreme. Only when one was supreme could there be real peace and quiet. Tranquility was stability. Jiang Shan took a deep breath, opened his eyes, looked at Jiang Shangyu in front of him, and said gently, "Don't be too anxious." "I understand." Jiang Shangyu nodded with a smile. His eyes were in a trance. He took back his palm, put it behind him, and said with a smile, "I just want to grasp what I can grasp." The sun gradually became dazzling. The blazing light covered all the brilliance in his eyes. Jiang Shangyu suddenly called out softly, "Dad?" Jiang Shan responded. "Have you heard of heart cancer?" Jiang Shangyu asked. Jiang Shan froze for a moment. Heart cancer? It's an extremely rare kind of heart tumor. There have been few cases in Zhengzhou state in the past 100 years. Occasionally, there are a few, but they are all caused by special reasons. It's a disease that can't happen without special circumstances. Jiang Shangyu said. Jiang Shan shook his head. I haven't seen it. I haven't seen it either. Jiang Shangyu smiled. I just remembered a story I heard a long time ago. It is said that in a certain country, a powerful big shot found that his position was getting more and more embarrassing after the country's situation changed, and his influence was getting weaker and weaker. In order to save the fate of himself and his family, he had to pray to another rising young magnate. Unfortunately, this old big shot had offended the young magnate a long time ago, but in order to reverse the fate of himself and his family, he still decided to apologize to the young magnate humbly. The two met at a high-standard banquet. The old man had a cold and coughed a few times. Out of concern, the young magnate called a doctor to diagnose the old man. The medicine of Zhengzhou state is broad and profound. The doctor only felt the old man's pulse and had already diagnosed that the old man had heart cancer and needed immediate treatment. The old man knew that he didn't have heart cancer, but he still thanked the young magnate for his kindness and apologized to him seriously. The other party was very generous and said that the previous grievances were just a misunderstanding. After the banquet, everything in the past would be written off. However, he made a request to the old man, or rather, a request. Jiang Shangyu's tone suddenly paused. He tightly pursed his lips, and his eyes were as calm as a pool of stagnant water. And then? What request did he make? Jiang Shan asked. And then, Jiang Shangyu laughed. The young magnate said that heart cancer was rare in the world, and it was simply a fantasy to have a tumor in the heart. He hoped that he could see what the so-called heart cancer looked like with his own eyes, and hoped that the old man could fulfill his wish. The corner of Jiang Shan's mouth moved. Dad. Jiang Shangyu laughed in a strange tone. Do you know what happened in the end? The corner of Jiang Shan's mouth moved, and he couldn't say anything for a while. The old man agreed to the other party's request at that banquet. He called home, then asked the young magnate for a dagger, stabbed him, and directly dug out his heart. Jiang Shan suddenly felt that this midsummer morning was so cold, like the deep winter. Jiang Shan had never heard of this story. It didn't matter whether this story was true or false. What mattered was that the content of this story was so cruel. There were high and low people in life, and they would all die in the end. But in the eyes of the superior, life and death could also be controlled and played with. The only difference was whether the other party wanted you to die or not. When the other party wanted you to die, he could directly kill you if he had a reason. When the other party wanted you to die, he could directly order you to die if he had a reason. When the other party wanted you to die, he could directly force you to die if he had no reason or power. In the eyes of the superior, if he wanted you to live, a cold was a cold. If he wanted you to die, a cold was heart cancer. Extreme. Cold-blooded. Domineering. Cruel. This story directly showed the difference between the superior and the inferior completely, without leaving the slightest leeway. A story is a story after all. Jiang Shan was silent for a long time before he whispered. Yes. Jiang Shangyu said with a smile. I just suddenly thought of it, so I couldn't help but share it with you. The sun continued to rise, illuminating the entire city. Jiang Shangyu smiled lightly, as if he had not just thought of it and talked about any coldness and cruelty of the dark world. One of his hands was still behind his back, clenched into a fist. His nails pierced the flesh, and the blood flowed down his palm drop by drop, dyeing the ground red. The red was almost dazzling. Jiang Shan seemed to want to say something, but a cell phone suddenly rang. Jiang Shan looked down at the number, and his face slightly froze. Who is it? Jiang Shangyu asked, keeping his composure. Jiang Shan glanced at him and said calmly, Gu Xingyun. Jiang Shangyu narrowed his eyes and did not speak. The maneuver of the two academies in Huading was coming to an end. It was coming to an end, which meant that it was not officially over. However, the content of the maneuver on the first day was too shocking. The battle between the young invincible realm expert and the expert at the peak of the thundershocking realm almost overshadowed the limelight of the next maneuver. Moreover, the first place had been reserved by the East Emperor Palace early, so the whole maneuver was boring. Fewer and fewer heavyweight guests went to the Sky Academy to watch the maneuver. However, as the god of war of Zhongzhou State, Gu Xingyun had to attend the grand event of the special warfare system anyway. Even though his current injury was extremely serious, he would spend most of his time there before the end of the maneuver. What did he mean by suddenly calling at this time? Jiang Shan slowly answered the phone. He had no reason not to answer it. The Jiang family was originally a member of the Prince Group, but in recent years, the Prince Group wanted Jiang Shan to leave its base camp in Beijiang. As the two sides gradually drifted apart, Jiang Shan was gradually drawn over by the Special Warfare Group. From this perspective, Gu Xingyun was now the behind-the-scenes boss of the Jiang family. Your Highness, good morning. Jiang Shan answered the phone. In the blink of an eye, he already had a gentle but not flattering smile. Brother Jiang, have you heard what happened in Reki City? Gu Xingyun asked. There were not so many rules within the Special Warfare Group, and Gu Xingyun's address of Jiang Shan seemed casual and intimate. Reki City? Jiang Shan froze for a moment. He was not pretending to be stupid, but he really did not receive any news. It happened not long ago. Gu Xingyun's voice was solemn and complicated. What happened in Reki City had just passed. It was a short period of time, but it was enough for the top figures in Zhongzhou State to know the exact news. Chen Qingwan was killed by Li Tianlan. What? Jiang Shan was suddenly shocked and subconsciously said, then the Sword Emperor, humph. Gu Xingyun snorted coldly. Wang Tianzong miscalculated and was set up by Li Tianlan. Now Chen Qingwan was killed, and even Wang Tianzong was imprisoned by Li Tianlan. Jiang Shan did not speak for a long time. The impact of this news was indeed too strong. I just spoke to Wang Qinglei on the phone. Gu Xingyun softened his tone and said. Jiang Shan answered indiscriminately, and his mind suddenly became a little chaotic. It seems that the Wang family of Beihai can't do anything for the time being. Even if they do, they won't act rashly before contacting Wang Tianzong. But the Snowdance Corps can't be given to Li Tianlan for nothing. I think we should send someone to replace Chen Qingwan this time. Gu Xingyun said, I have communicated with Wang Qinglei about this matter, and he agrees in principle. Send someone from the Special Warfare Group? The Vice Marshal of the Snowdance Corps? Jiang Shan suddenly felt that something was wrong. Well, it's good, but there's no but. Gu Xingyun interrupted Jiang Shan with a smile. It's a rare opportunity to control part of the power of the Snowdance Corps. I just weighed it and found the most suitable candidate. Jiang Shan's heart gradually sank. Sure enough, Gu Xingyun said calmly, I think Jiang Shangyu is good. Chapter 487. I think Jiang Shangyu is good. When he said this, Gu Xingyun used a question, with an obvious meaning of inquiry. It sounded very polite. But Jiang Shan's face became extremely embarrassed in an instant. The Vice Marshal and the second-in-command of the largest Special Warfare Corps in Zhongzhou State were indeed respected. But how could others intervene in the current Snowdance Corps? Chen Qingwan was Wang Qinglei's direct descendant, and he was killed in front of Wang Tianzong. Li Tianlan killed him without hesitation. He did not give Wang Tianzong face. If Gu Xingyun's direct descendant went there, Li Tianlan would not give him face. Now, only Li Tianlan's will was unimpeded in the Snowdance Corps. Jiang Shangyu went to the Snowdance Corps with a high title, but in fact, what was the use? The most important thing was that the chaos in Eastern Europe had completely evolved into a huge vortex that had never been seen in the Dark World in decades. The storm was fierce, and the waves never stopped. The invincible realm experts were like non-entities. In the chaos, there was an extremely powerful marshal above them. Was Jiang Shangyu courting death if he went there? Jiang Shan held the mobile phone in his hand tightly and did not speak for a while. Don't get me wrong. Gu Xingyun seemed to know that his proposal was too sudden, so he chuckled and said, I heard that Jiang Shangyu's injury is recovering well, and Li Tianlan is too young in the Snowdance Corps. At first, we planned to give him an old comrade, but Li Tianlan is domineering and doesn't give face to anyone. An old comrade can't control him, so it's better to find a young man to go to Eastern Europe to gain experience. Today, among the young generation, Jiang Shangyu is the best. It's good for his growth to go to Eastern Europe to experience some things. At the very least, even if he loses, it's nothing. Jiang Shan's face was cloudy. Jiang Shangyu clearly heard Gu Xingyun's voice. He narrowed his eyes, nodded, and said in an imperceptible voice, I'm going to Eastern Europe. Agree with him. Jiang Shan was stunned and looked at his son. Jiang Shangyu nodded hard. Jiang Shan took a deep breath. He really didn't know how to refuse Gu Xingyun's proposal. The Jiang family had been unstable in recent years. Jiang Shan was in the decision-making committee. Although he was very prominent, after he gave up the position of Black Tortoise, one of the four spirits, a few years ago, the Jiang family became even weaker. After drifting away from the prince group, Jiang Shan never approached the Wang family of Beihai. Now he could only approach the Special Warfare Group and Gu Xingyun step by step. At this time, he could not refuse any of Gu Xingyun's requests. Jiang Shan also knew in his heart that he should always submit a proof of allegiance. Just let Jiang Shangyu go to Eastern Europe? Jiang Shan felt that he couldn't bear the risk of proving his loyalty. Jiang Shangyu nodded calmly with a smile, once again confirming his thoughts. Jiang Shan took a deep breath and said in a deep voice, Since your highness thinks so highly of Xiaoyu, I have no objection. I will let him go to Eastern Europe. All right. Gu Xingyun smiled. His smile was extremely happy. Tell him for me. After returning from Eastern Europe, I'll give him a big surprise. Jiang Shan silently hung up the phone and looked at Jiang Shangyu. After a long silence, he slowly said, Tell me what you think. Eastern Europe, I have to go and have a look. I've been suffering from no suitable identity before. Since Gu Xingyun has sent the identity to me, why shouldn't I accept it? Jiang Shangyu chuckled. Is it really so easy to accept this identity? Jiang Shan narrowed his eyes, and there was already a hint of anger in his tone. It's not too difficult. Jiang Shangyu chuckled and said, I don't know how Chen Qingwan died, but I still have some understanding of Li Tianlan. If he is not in the right, he will never take action. So it's not difficult to guess how Chen Qingwan died. If I go to Eastern Europe, I may represent the position of Kunlun City and Special Exhibition Group, but I first represent my own position. I'm the vice marshal, and I follow the marshal's orders. As long as I do well, I don't have to worry about Li Tianlan giving me trouble. Dad, don't forget that Li Tianlan and I have cooperation. Naive. Jiang Shan sneered. Let's not talk about anything else. Let's talk about your current realm. The Thundershocking realm is not stable. How can you serve as the vice marshal of the Snowdance Corps? Any high-level member of the Snowdance Corps is at least at the peak of the Thundershocking realm. In terms of realm, you can't convince the public. What's the point? Is the realm so important? Jiang Shangyu suddenly said. His voice was strangely quiet. Jiang Shan paused subconsciously. Don't worry, dude. The realm is not a problem. Don't forget my injury. He chuckled with indescribable comfort. It's much better. Even if we don't talk about the realm, how can things be so simple? Chen Qingwan was killed in front of Wang Tianzong, and Li Tianlan was safe and sound. It can indeed explain a lot of problems. But do you think Chen Qingwan wants to do some things? He can't violate the will of the Wang family of Beihai when he is in the Wang family of Beihai. Can you violate the will of Kunlun City when you are in Kunlun City? Jiang Shan said in a low voice, I can't help it. In fact, many people don't understand one thing. In the chaos in Eastern Europe, except for a few people, no one can help it. Jiang Shangyu said calmly, because they won't understand what will happen after the chaos in Eastern Europe. Jiang Shan frowned and seriously thought about his son's words. In recent years, we have all been very depressed, and so has Li Tianlan. Only when an era is about to end can a new era be created. But during this period, for those who have the ability to create a new era, it is depressing. No one denies Gu Xingyun and Wang Tianzong's strength and power, but although they stand in a high position, they are not omnipotent. Jiang Shangyu said seriously. What do you want to do? Jiang Shan frowned and warned, don't mess around. I don't intend to mess around, but I also need to create the opportunity our Jiang family needs in Eastern Europe. I cooperate with Li Tianlan because we have a common demand, to let this era pass. Jiang Shangyu looked up at the bright sunshine and white clouds in the sky. The air in Jiang City was very good. The sky was high and the clouds were light. It was blue and extremely pure. The weather is good today. Jiang Shangyu suddenly said, but there's still a shadow. Jiang Shan looked at his son in a daze, with a complicated look in his eyes. Jiang Shangyu looked into the distance and stared in the direction of Eastern Europe. He was silent for a long time. Gu Xingyun said that he had communicated with Wang Qinglei. In fact, this was not completely accurate. To be precise, the communication between Gu Xingyun and Wang Qinglei was not over. Even when he called Jiang Shan, Wang Qinglei was sitting opposite him. In the beginning, it was Wang Qinglei who wanted Jiang Shangyu to be the vice marshal of the Snowdance Corps. This recommendation was unexpected for Jiang Shan. It was also unexpected for Gu Xingyun. Even if he hung up the phone, Gu Xingyun did not figure out why Wang Qinglei recommended Jiang Shangyu. What did Jiang Shan say? Wang Qinglei picked up the teacup and took a sip of tea, chuckling softly. The two were now in the VIP room of the Sky Academy. The final maneuver was coming to an end. 1/3 of the individual maneuver had passed, and there was less than an hour before the official start of today. What can he say? Gu Xingyun shook his head and coughed. He can't refuse. That's true. Wang Qinglei laughed, narrowed his eyes, and said, I hope Jiang Shangyu can surprise us. His tone was somewhat meaningful. He was probably the only one who knew what this so-called surprise was. But Gu Xingyun's eyes narrowed and he glanced at Wang Qinglei calmly. Because I want to remind you that the Wang family of Beihai and Li Tianlan's resurgence seriously threaten not only the Wang family of Beihai but also Kunlun City. Wang Qinglei said indifferently, now the Wang family of Beihai is under a lot of pressure in Eastern Europe. Chen Qinghuan's death directly made us lose the right to speak in the Snowdance Corps. At this time, Kunlun City naturally has to show some sincerity. It's not just our business to deal with the Li family. I mean, why Jiang Shangyu? Gu Xingyun asked attentively, and there was a flash of doubt in his eyes. Wang Qinglei was stunned, and then he couldn't help laughing. Because he is capable enough. Since the old comrade can't control Li Tianlan, he naturally has to send young people to suppress the old comrade. Li Tianlan is domineering. If he can't tolerate new young colleagues, it means that he can't tolerate people. This will affect many people's view of Li Tianlan. I also hope to see this. Since we send young people, they naturally have to be able to speak in front of Li Tianlan. Wang Qinglei looked into Gu Xingyun's eyes and said thoughtfully, if you don't send Jiang Shangyu, are you willing to let Gu Hanshan go there? Gu Xingyun's expression froze slightly, and he lowered his head to drink tea. He was really reluctant. Gu Hanshan was the heir he had high hopes for. Although his realm was not low now, it was obvious that he could not cope with the situation in Eastern Europe. In this way, Jiang Shangyu was indeed the most suitable candidate. After tonight, what do you think of the situation in Eastern Europe? Wang Qinglei looked at Gu Hanshan and said, if the Shadow Throne withdraws from Eastern Europe and faces the Li family again, we will lose a considerable part of our support. It can even be said that we will suffer heavy losses. Isn't that what you want? Gu Xingyun said indifferently, I heard that King Tong and Wang Tianzong have a very good relationship. The discord between Wang Qinglei and Wang Tianzong had become more and more obvious. This was the biggest hidden danger within the Wang family of Beihai. In many people's view, it was only a matter of time before Wang Qinglei seized power. He was just waiting for an opportunity. If the Shadow Throne suffered a heavy blow this time, When Wang Qinglei seized power in the future, Wang Tianzong would have one less ally. This was a good thing in any case. But the problem is that I want Eastern Europe more. Wang Qinglei said with a smile, Lianon, damn it. Gu Xingyun replied with a hum and did not speak. Wang Qinglei hesitated for a moment and said calmly, I heard that Kunlun City hit a sword move after the treason case. Is that sword move now in Eastern Europe? Gu Xingyun looked up at Wang Qinglei with sharp eyes. Killing Li Tianlan with that sword move complements each other. Wang Qinglei commented. The sword is out of the mountain. What can I do? Gu Xingyun was silent for a while and shook his head in a self-mocking manner. You don't mean it. Wang Qinglei said. Gu Xingyun did not speak, but looked at the huge globe placed in the lounge. On the globe, the pattern of Eastern Europe fell into Gu Xingyun's eyes. Gu Xingyun looked at it quietly and did not speak for a long time. Chapter 488. There was no sign or brewing. It seemed that when everyone was not mentally prepared, Reki City, which had calmed down after the turmoil, suddenly boiled up in the heavy rain. Intense explosions and roars spread throughout the entire city. The Caesar Hotel, which was dozens of floors high, completely collapsed under the dense bombardment of artillery shells. The huge stairs were shattered into countless boulders that fell to the ground. Countless buildings in the entire block collapsed in the violent tremors. It was like the end of the world. The elites belonging to the Shadow Throne struggled frantically in the ruins of the huge hotel. The rain under the curtain of the night became more and more violent. The heavy rain dispersed the vast smoke and dust. Blood flowed unscrupulously along the rain in the ruins. King Tong's figure landed on the ground. Looking at everything around her, her eyes suddenly turned red. The Shadow Throne was one of the strongest forces in Europe. It had far-reaching influence, strong strength, and a streamlined organization. This force could be unscrupulous in most European countries. Its development model was simply perfect. Because of this, the Shadow Throne had always attracted experts from all walks of life in the Dark World to join it. This was also the reason why the Shadow Throne was extremely terrifying in the hearts of the people in the Dark World, although King Tong's strength was not high on the divine list. The Wang family of Beihai had the Sword Emperor who dominated the world. The Jiang family of South America had Black Tortoise with unparalleled defense. The Vatican had more than 1 billion believers as its foundation. As for the Shadow Throne, many experts and top talents in different fields had built their own strong and stable cornerstone. King Tong, who was known as the Queen, was only in the middle of the divine list. But Shadow Throne had the most thunder-shocking realm experts among all the superpowers in the Dark World. The Shadow Throne had bet heavily on the chaos in Eastern Europe. Whether Wang Tianzong needed them to break the trap or not, King Tong needed enough strength to get the interests of Eastern Europe or to bet on the future interests of the Shadow Throne. Therefore, King Tong had invested a lot in Reki City. Not counting the secret base outside Reki City. In the Caesar Hotel alone, there were more than 30 thunder-shocking realm experts and more than 200 fire-flaming realm elites. All in all, plus the ice-condensing realm. A Caesar hotel accommodated thousands of elites of the Shadow Throne. Such a huge investment, when they were unprepared, was almost defeated by Wulan's state, which they despised the most. The heavy rain, together with the strong smell of blood, continued to spread. His ears were filled with frenzied roars. All King Tong's orders had been completely drowned out by the huge sound waves. In front of him were all the troops of Wulan's state, fully armed and armed. War needs no declarations. The moment the Caesar Hotel collapsed and the Shadow Throne experts stood up from the ruins, the violent gunshots that shook the sky rang out continuously. Anger surged in his heart and spread throughout his entire body. In her extreme anger and resentment, King Tong calmed down like never before. In recent years, the Shadow Throne relied on the largest number of thunder-shocking realm experts to dominate the Dark World. Everyone in the Dark World knew that King Tong was the queen. But King Tong rarely made a move. Therefore, the entire Dark World seemed to have forgotten what a queen was. A hail of bullets. Countless bullets whizzed over, occupying almost every inch of space. A ray of light suddenly lit up in front of the hotel ruins. The light spread rapidly with King Tong as the center. The entire ruins were instantly illuminated. King Tong disappeared from everyone's sight, and the light spread into a halo. In everyone's sight, the halo spread like water ripples. The blazing white light carried endless heat. Thunder, raging fire, and ice were surging in the halo. All the roars seemed to disappear for a moment. In the moment of incomparable silence, King Tong's voice occupied all of them. She was dignified, calm, and indifferent. Gather. Boom. After a moment of silence, the roar sounded again. King Tong suddenly took a step forward and rushed forward. Her long golden hair seemed to be burning and danced wildly. Her figure appeared in the center of the halo. She was a little delicate, but at this moment, she seemed to have blocked the ruins of the entire Caesar Hotel behind her. It was raining heavily. Bullets flew everywhere. Wherever the halo passed, the rain and bullets completely disappeared. The night sky was extremely clear, and there was only light. The army of Wulan State, which surrounded the Caesar Hotel, seemed to subconsciously pause. In less than a second, King Tong rushed over. The halo around her, which had spread to 100 meters, also rushed over. The light was like a waterfall, and it was vast. The halo, which had been condensed to the extreme, suddenly exploded in front of the army of Wulan State. There was a sudden crackling sound in front of the ruins. The halo suddenly exploded at the forefront of the crowd. A large area of deep blue and raging fire occupied everyone's sight in an instant. The deep blue thunderbolt was wrapped in the halo. At first, there was only one, but the moment it touched the human body, it spread wildly. The thunderbolt was almost endless and linked to the group of troops. The raging fire was surging, and the ice was condensed. An extremely cold wind blew through the silent night. After the sound of the wind, everything in front of the ruins of the hotel became completely quiet. King Tong looked coldly at the army of Wulan State in front of her. The moment when the halo spread was very short. But in the blink of an eye, the bodies of hundreds of soldiers who were shrouded by the halo were completely stiff. Everyone's weapons and equipment were completely damaged, their clothes were tattered, and their bodies were scorched black. The evaporated rain curtain fell again. The night wind was as cold as a knife, blowing the rain curtain askew. The raindrops fell on the crowd, and the sound of condensation rang out. In everyone's sight, the feet of hundreds of troops who had been swept by the halo began to freeze. The thick ice spread from their feet to their whole bodies, and finally, they were completely frozen in ice. There was silence in front of the ruins. Countless soldiers of Wulan State looked at this scene in horror. The ice blocks that sealed the human bodies suddenly ignited with raging flames. The raging fire was extremely turbulent, and it seemed to have an unimaginable high temperature. In an instant, the soldiers who were frozen in the ice were burned to ashes. The rain was still falling, but it became extremely hot. The hot rain quickly melted the ice. A large amount of ashes scattered on the ground and were washed away by the rain. Hundreds of soldiers completely lost all traces of their existence. If it weren't for the large empty space in front of King Tong, it would have been as if nothing had happened in front of the ruins. All the soldiers of Wulan State who saw this scene with their own eyes felt extremely cold. One figure after another rushed out of the ruins of the hotel, and the elites of the Shadow Throne began to gather toward King Tong. Everyone knew that they should stop this. But no one dared to move, and no one dared to give the order. King Tong took another step forward. The army of Wulan State, which occupied almost the entire block, took a step back in unison. In the past 10 years, Wulan State had never had its own invincible realm expert. Even the Rekvia family, which dominated the fate of Wulan State, did not have an invincible realm expert. The tyrant they could drive was the leader of the entire Polar Ground Alliance. Everyone knew that there were invincible realm experts in the Dark World. In the eyes of many half-step invincible realm experts, only the top 5 on the divine list, that was, the experts at the peak of the invincible realm, could be called gods. But in the eyes of ordinary troops, the invincible realm itself was synonymous with gods. It was the first time for all the troops of Wulan State to fight with an invincible realm expert tonight. In the face of this kind of power that could almost destroy heaven and earth, no one would not be afraid. Ice Condensed Tomb. Less than a block away from the Caesar Hotel, Qin Shilai, the dark swordsman of Eastern Europe, looked at the proud and cold King Tong on the screen. After a long time, he sighed softly. Ice Condensed Tomb was a kind of change in the domain of the invincible realm. It was equivalent to integrating a warrior's martial arts path in an instant and breaking out in an instant. Cold wind, cold ice, raging fire, and thunder. All the characteristics of the four realms of martial arts were completely integrated and turned into light. Pure light would eventually become a power that destroyed everything. It was the unique skill of King Tong in front of him. Ice Condensed Tomb. This unique skill was famous in Europe and even the entire Dark World. But it did not originate from Rothschild. It originated from the Vatican. The Vatican also had a unique skill called Ice Condensed Tomb, because the Rothschild family had produced 2 popes in a row. But after many years of inheritance, only Rothschild's Ice Condensed Tomb was the most authentic and original. Qin Shilai replayed the process of King Tong's attack again. He narrowed his eyes and seemed to be thinking about something. "Your Highness, what should we do now?" Prime Minister Riker stood beside Qin Shilai. He hesitated for a moment and couldn't help asking. They were now only a block away from the Caesar Hotel. It was an underground space that would not be noticed at all on weekdays. It belonged to an intelligence department under the National Defense of Wulan State. It was well equipped and close to the Caesar Hotel. So it naturally became the headquarters of all the operations tonight. There was a busy scene everywhere in the headquarters. The top talents of the military of Wulan State kept answering the phone, mobilizing military forces and armaments. There was a huge screen that occupied the entire wall in the headquarters. At this time, the screen had been connected to the satellite of Wulan State. The entire streets and alleys of Reki City were reflected on the screen. At this moment, every street in Reki City was filled with troops. All the troops were slowly gathering in the direction of the Caesar Hotel like a torrent. Hearing Riker's question, Qin Shilai froze for a moment and then laughed. "Prime Minister Riker, you shouldn't ask me this question. Isn't the current situation simple enough? We've hit the main force of the Shadow Throne in the fiercest way. What should we do next? Do you still expect to negotiate? Of course. Let your army attack and compress the living space of the Shadow Throne with the greatest force." But Riker trembled all over. Although he was a little embarrassed, he still chose to tell the truth. But there are no invincible realm experts in Wulan State now. There were more than no invincible realm experts in Wulan State now. On the date of death, the Snowdance Corps marched, and Rekvia changed dramatically. A considerable part of the thundershocking realm experts in Wulan State were killed by Li Tianlan and the Snowdance Corps. Wulan State was extremely valuable in the Dark World, but its status was not high. After the great change on the date of death, their special warfare force was even less. Everyone knew that in the war, only an invincible realm expert could restrain an invincible realm expert. Wulan State now had a lot of troops. But it was not invincible. And King Tong was standing there. Of course, Riker knew that it was impossible to talk to the Shadow Throne now. But if they attacked, who would restrain King Tong? "We don't have anyone who can restrain King Tong," Riker said in a low voice. Qin Shilai quietly looked at the picture of the Caesar Hotel before 9 o'clock on the screen. After a long time, he nodded and said, Riker frowned. He originally wanted Qin Shilai to continue speaking, but after waiting for a long time, he didn't see any reaction from him. He took a deep breath and could only take the initiative to ask, "Your Highness, can you go to the Caesar Hotel and restrain them?" "No." Qin Shilai shook his head. Riker looked at Qin Shilai blankly and said nothing. "Now, it's not the right time." Qin Shilai said seriously, "This is His Highness's plan. I know when I should take action. I really can't do it now." But Riker frowned tightly. There are no invincible realm experts in Wulan State. Qin Shilai was silent for a few seconds. who said that only invincible realm experts can restrain invincible realm experts. He gently touched the sword in his arms and said lightly. This sentence was very light. But in Riker's ears, it was extremely indifferent. Riker's body shook violently, and he said in a dry voice, "Your Highness, what do you mean?" "They can do it too." Qin Shilai pointed to the army of Wulan State on the screen, and there was only calmness in his tone. "They are all ordinary troops." Riker suddenly growled. Qin Shilai said calmly, "But there are many of them." No matter how the war developed, there was always only one obvious advantage. That was, there were many people. Ordinary people were like nonentities in front of an invincible realm expert. They could not stop an invincible realm expert. That was because there were not enough people. An invincible realm expert could kill 1,000 people or 10,000 people, but his strength was limited after all. If he could kill 10,000 people, could he kill 100,000 people? There were indeed no invincible realm experts in Wulan State now. But on the date of death, the Snowdance Corps had crippled nearly half of the military strength of Wulan State, and the remaining half was forced to approach Reki City because of the situation. At this moment, even if there were no invincible realm experts in Reki City, so what? There were many of them. Riker broke out in a cold sweat and his face was pale. He understood what Qin Shilai meant, but he really didn't want to give this cruel order. "Prime Minister Riker, you must be clear that it's a war now. Since it's a war, how can there be no sacrifice? Some sacrifices at certain times are the most important. We have an advantage now, but it's not so big that it can decide everything." If Wang Tianzong is not in the office of the president, His Highness Li Tianlan can casually mobilize 3,000 members of the Snowdance Corps and charge. Who do you think can stop the Shadow Throne, including King Tong? Qin Shilai patted Riker on the shoulder and said, "I just want to tell you that His Highness Li Tianlan doesn't want to consume the military strength of Reki City, but that the Snowdance Corps has more important things to do." Riker did not speak. After a long while, he took out his mobile phone with a trembling hand and dialed Li Tianlan's number. The call was quickly connected. Riker took a deep breath and forced himself to calm down. "Your Highness, there are no invincible realm experts in Wulan State who can restrain King Tong now. Your Highness, please, ordinary troops can restrain King Tong." Li Tianlan's voice came out of the phone, extremely indifferent. Riker stayed where he was, and his face became more and more embarrassed. Li Tianlan didn't seem to know what Riker was thinking. He just said calmly, "Riker, don't underestimate the ordinary army. In many cases, we have the general trend. The ordinary army is the power that can decide everything. They can do a lot of things, a lot of things." Li Tianlan chuckled. In Riker's ears, there was an indescribable cruelty and determination in his laughter. "So, I want to ask you another question. How many troops do you have in Reki City tonight?" Chapter 489. There is another chapter ahead, 2 chapters today. No one could have expected that Li Tianlan would be so radical. Li Tianlan had asked Riker twice how many troops he had. After the first time, there was a war in front of the Caesar Hotel at night. Now he asked Riker for the second time. What did he mean? Riker was not sure. But he was sure that no matter what Li Tianlan meant, at least it would not be the same as the first time he asked this question. "Your Highness," Riker could clearly hear the trembling in his tone. Now he had no idea of resisting Li Tianlan, and he was powerless to resist. But it seemed that it was not until this moment that he realized who the person who controlled his fate was. He was a complete madman and gambler. He was always staking everything on one throw, always seeking wealth and danger. Such an extreme style could allow him to reach the sky in a single step, but it would also cause him and everyone around him to be consigned to eternal damnation. Now Prime Minister Riker still had no idea of resisting Li Tianlan. But he was extremely afraid. It was an infinite fear of the future. "It's too urgent, Your Highness," Riker emphasized, and his voice trembled. It was almost a plea. Li Tianlan was silent for a while and said calmly, "It's a little urgent, but..." He seemed to think for a moment and then said, In any case, the Shadow Throne must be taken down. Riker, let your army attack at all costs. His tone was very indifferent. But he was very determined, and there was no room for negotiation. Riker answered in a daze, yes. On the screen in front of him, King Tong took another step forward. There was a busy phone call in the headquarters. Several military advisors of Wulan State came over to ask him for instructions on the next step. Riker quietly looked at his own army on the screen. His insides were twisted into a ball. Everyone knew that things had come to this point, and there would be no second order. The only order was to attack. But before Riker spoke, no one dared to give this order. This was equivalent to letting a large number of soldiers die. Now the number of troops that Reki City could mobilize was as high as 50,000. 50,000 people rushed up at the same time. Not to mention King Tong, even Wang Tianzong could not resist them. King Tong could naturally set off a storm of blood alone and barely kill her way out. But the problem was that she was not alone. She was the queen of the Shadow Throne. Behind her were thousands of elites from the Shadow Throne. Reki City was now under the gaze of the whole world. How could King Tong retreat? He could not retreat. He could only fight to the death. Li Tianlan was in front of Riker, so he could not retreat. There was a Shadow Throne behind King Tong, so she could not retreat. Tonight, no matter who won or lost, Reki City was destined to be flooded with blood. Rick slowly shifted his gaze and looked at the others in the command center. Almost everyone was observing him, intentionally or unintentionally, waiting for his orders. Rick slowly clenched his fists, took a deep breath, and said in a deep voice, "At all costs." When Li Tianlan hung up the phone, Wang Tianzong was still standing in the courtyard, quietly looking in the direction of the Caesar Hotel. The Caesar Hotel was very tall. Standing in the presidential palace, one could see the brilliant lights of the Caesar Hotel. But now, the brilliant lights had completely disappeared, and the entire Caesar Hotel had completely collapsed. Wang Tianzong stood there, and no one knew what he was thinking. In Li Tianlan's perception, Wang Tianzong in this state was completely like a cloud, quiet, illusory, and also unfathomable. Li Tianlan looked at Wang Tianzong's back in silence. "You're in too much of a hurry." Dongqing Rushi walked up to him and said softly, "Do you think so, too?" Li Tianlan looked at her and asked. Dongqing Rushi nodded seriously and said, "It's too risky. I just have a feeling that it's not good for me to drag on like this." Li Tianlan looked at Wang Tianzong's back and said softly, "Time may not be on my side. The chaos in Eastern Europe should end as soon as possible." Wang Tianzong made him feel heavier and heavier, but lighter and lighter. He could not understand the specific charm of this feeling for the time being. But now he could see the end of martial arts. He could sense that Wang Tianzong was moving towards the end of martial arts, step by step. He walked very slowly with small steps. But he was also very close to the end. Maybe tomorrow, maybe in the next second, Wang Tianzong might cross that line. If Wang Tianzong really succeeded in breaking through, everything he and the Snowdance Corps had done in Eastern Europe would become meaningless. "You don't like Eastern Europe?" Dongqing Rushi said softly. They didn't like Eastern Europe before, because they didn't like Li Tianlan to come to Eastern Europe. But now it was completely different. After the date of death, Li Tianlan took down Wulan State. His great achievements had completely established Li Tianlan's position. No one denied that the chaos in Eastern Europe was extremely dangerous, but Li Tianlan now had the qualification to play with other superpowers in the chaos. On this stage, Li Tianlan could get a lot of things. "It's not a matter of liking it or not," Li Tianlan said. "We've taken down Wulan State, so there's no need to waste time here. Only when I return to Zhongzhou State and Tianan can my everything really begin." He sighed softly and said, "I want to go back to China." Dongqing Rushi didn't speak, but hugged Li Tianlan gently from behind. Wang Tianzong moved his body and turned back to the room. When he returned to the room, he reached out again and took out the instrument in his hand with a calm expression. Li Tianlan's heart sank for no reason. If that instrument meant the mysterious devil troop of the Wang family of Beihai. So when Wang Tianzong stood in the courtyard just now, was he looking at the Caesar Hotel or waiting for a signal? Li Tianlan suddenly realized that in the chaos in Eastern Europe, time would not be on his side. Even tonight, time might not be on his side. Li Tianlan narrowed his eyes and felt the warmth and elasticity of Dongqing Rushi against his back. He reached out and held her hand around him, then said softly, "Help me contact the Dark Knights now." The battle between Wulan's state and the Shadow Throne was destined to be tragic. Tragic often meant lasting. Now Li Tianlan just wanted to end the battle as soon as possible. But he needed a force that could enter this battlefield and completely break the deadlock. Tonight, he contacted the Vatican, the Heroes Club, the Fantasy World, the Men in Black, and all the superpowers in the Dark World. At this time, Wulan's state and the Shadow Throne were locked in a fierce battle. As long as a superpower joined in, other superpowers would attack the Shadow Throne together. At present, the Dark Knights were the only candidate. The Dark Knights had been the firmest and most reliable ally of the Samsara Palace in recent years. Now, they naturally became Li Tianlan's ally. Only if they took the initiative to stand up and break the deadlock could there be a real possibility of a quick end to everything tonight. You're tuning in to the Wang Lin's Journey YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.